This is a masterclass on testimony videos. It is start to finish everything that I do to tell stories through video. By the way, my name is Jake Hill. I help creatives make the best videos possible for their churches. And this video is actually a lesson from my course that you can check out down in the description. But without further ado, let's get into it. I wanted to briefly talk through the pre-production and the planning process of testimonies. I just use whatever project management software you're using. Usually you can make like a doc or something. I'm using Notion for this project, and I'll just assemble like some inspo, which we'll talk about in a second. Write down some interview questions, which is really huge, and then just some checkbox tasks that I need to remember on set. Maybe set some reminders for the day of, just to make sure I don't forget stuff like charging batteries, all those kind of things. I would recommend that just to make sure you have some to-do list stuff written out and you don't forget anything. So I kind of keep all those things, which I'm about to cover a little more in depth, just in a Notion page, as well as schedule stuff out in Google Calendar or whatever you want to use. But as always, staying organized is super important. So as far as the questions go, honestly, the more the better. I just don't want to run out of questions when I'm asking the person and sitting down interviewing. And I'll talk a little more about my process as far as like, do I just have them talk to no one? Do I sit across from them, which I typically do? So I am kind of treating it more like an interview and a conversation, which is why I kind of use the terms like interview and testimony pretty interchangeably, because for me, that kind of is what it is. I try to like ask questions, practice active listening whenever I'm capturing someone's testimony. And I find that's just works the best for me, because I know I'm having the edit in mind, right, while I'm filming. So I know what I need to capture. I know when I get a good part, and I know when I can dip out the audio so I can actually give some responses, which is kind of hard to do if you're not the one editing and you don't know when you can cut out the audio and when you're going to be overlapping with their dialogue. All that to say, I do write out questions beforehand, as many as I possibly can. For other projects, this has been like over 10. If I know what I'm really like asking, usually the more specific the story, the more questions I can come up with relating to it. But for this project, we will be interviewing my wife for her testimony, because she's awesome and allowed me to interview her and capture her testimony just for educational purposes for this video. So really, it's similar to even if you were capturing like testimonials for a brand. You just don't want to run out of questions if they're giving you really short answers. You want to have open-ended questions, which is huge for sure. Not just yes or no questions. Really, the more the better. Yeah. So a few of the ones that I've already written down that I'll probably add to a little bit before we shoot. So as far as testimonies go, I try and really stick to typical just like story structure. So kind of sticking to your life before Christ, before becoming a Christian, and what that looked like. And then that moment when you got saved, when you found Jesus, and then the moments preceding, as well as the years preceding, kind of depends on the person, right? But so it's really just your life before, during, and after that encounter with Jesus, or however that kind of looks for your specific situation. So that's kind of what all my questions are geared towards. And that's obviously a little different if we have testimonies that are specific to someone being healed, or something a little more specific than that. But right now, I just have like 5 or 6 questions. What did your life look like before Jesus? How has Jesus changed your life? What has your journey of being a Christian been like? What are some of the biggest things you've learned being a Christian? Are there any key moments that stand out to you as being significant in your faith? So those are just general. Take those and use them if you want. But I just kind of came up with those kind of fast. I also always love to end just asking the person, like, is there anything you want to share that I haven't asked you about? Because sometimes they have something that they wanted to share but doesn't fit into a question. So yeah, that's just briefly like some of the questions that I ask. It depends on the project, but for a general testimony, sometimes having a lot of questions can help you hone in on their story and can help them articulate it a little better. But I also definitely try to ask questions in the moment. I'm always trying to like dive deeper into things that I think are interesting and things that I think should be dove into a little more. That's just kind of how I like to interview people for their testimonies. I would probably suggest, if you don't know the person, doing like a pre-interview, even if that's like the day of, before you sit down and film. That's been really helpful in my experience, just so you aren't going in blind, which I have done sometimes, and that can work out well because you are actually like sitting across from the person or persons you are capturing their testimony. And if you don't even know their testimony, sometimes it can be even better to like dial in and ask more questions just to get to know them a little more. Stuff like that helps because your audience isn't going to know the story, right? So it kind of helps sometimes like watching in that mindset. Location scouting is good. I'm not necessarily doing this for this project because I am going to be filming at the church that I currently work full time at. They've graciously allowed me to film there for this project, which is awesome. So I'm not going to do that because I kind of know the location, and I'll show you some images here in a second about it. But if you have someone, just a member of your church that you're filming, and you want to film like in their house or something like that, then I would definitely go there before the day of the shoot, so you can have a plan and you already see it, how you're gonna light it, capture audio and stuff before you get there. That can be really helpful. And the next is inspiration, or inspo. So I've talked about this quite a bit. I'm not going to go into it a ton more. For testimonies, I like to capture inspiration. I'll list a few places that I go just because I'm trying to find creative backgrounds, creative like angles for the cameras to be, and mainly lighting. That's a huge part of these testimonies, just where someone's just sitting kind of talking to me off camera or talking to the camera. Lighting is really, really huge, as well as the location. So really, those are the three big things that I try and get from inspo that I'm gathering, is like some of the shot angles that I want to see, some location, like set design, if you will, and then lighting, which is probably the biggest thing that I'm trying to find some inspiration for. Places I've already mentioned, honestly: Vimeo, YouTube, Instagram, social media, and then as well as frame set, shot deck, and film grab, which are great for just grabbing frames or stills from movies, commercials. And then honestly, documentaries are huge. Some of these you can find on YouTube for free, which is cool. But like documentaries have a ton of interview scenes, and those are pretty much what testimonies are. Is they're just sitting down, they have the camera like here, and your person's going to be talking off camera, typically to an interviewer. That's kind of the whole idea. It can be super helpful just to find some inspiration, because there's a ton out there. There's a lot of creativity in them, especially for how they tell stories, how they ask questions, how they set up their interview locations. Now, storyboarding and shot listing, I kind of debated just showing this, but to be totally honest, I don't typically do either of these for a testimony. I'm not going to go into those specifically, just because I typically forego those in favor of inspiration frames, like inspo frames, like from documentaries or YouTube. So I'm going to open up my computer and kind of lay out the room and lay out some of the lighting and angles and stuff, just so you can see, before we actually get into filming, how I kind of plan and think through lighting, and go through a few different setups that isn't going to involve moving stuff around in a room, just moving my mouse around a little bit, and that'll be a lot faster for everybody involved. I'm going to be using film set objects, which I just recently started using to plan out lighting diagrams, camera positioning, subject positioning, stuff like that. They're just basically little image files of all sorts of production gear, like cameras and lights. These are pretty much what we have to work with here, which is just the gear that I have. You may have more, you may have less. Overall, I have this big room. It's just kind of an event room, basically. 3 windows on this side, and there's like a door or 2 over here, which is kind of counting as one of our windows. So we're just going to kind of lay out our scene with mainly just to illustrate the lighting. My initial thought is I think I don't want to deal with the windows a lot, so I may end up like covering up the blinds or something like that, just so I don't have to deal with the sunlight, which can change during an interview, which can be like 20 to 30 minutes. It can be kind of annoying. So I think I may try and close off the windows, or at least shoot farther away from them, so they're not really affecting our lighting for the shoot. So a lot of people, when they do this, they'll kind of put their person interviewing here right up against a wall, and then they'll throw their camera like, even off to the side or something like that, and then their subject or interviewer right here, which can be cool, like if you have a good background and you know how to light it and everything. But most of the time, if you just have a light that's like right over here and it's just shining into your subject and onto the wall, you're going to get a really harsh shadow from them on the background. Not a lot of blur in the background, because like here, like it's blurry a little bit, but if you're shooting at f2.8 or 4 or something like that, it's not going to be very blurry just because your subject isn't very far away from their background. So all that to say, I like to avoid doing that. I try and space out and give as much depth from my subject to the background as possible. So what I'm going to do is kind of set up in the middle of the room. So maybe this is our interviewer, which is me in this case, and this is my wife. So I also like to kind of shoot in corners. It just gives a little more depth throughout the room. So I think we'll probably end up shooting kind of into this corner, which I've done for another video, and I think it'll turn out pretty cool, especially if we don't illuminate it a ton and just give some more distance and kind of leave it a little dark back there. So Sarah's subject is kind of like this. I think that'll be cool. And then I'm just going to sit right across from her, just like this, so I can ask her questions and talk and things like that, but I won't be on camera and I won't be heard in the final edit. So then I'm going to throw my camera, which again, we'll talk about this when we go shoot. So their eye line is just going to be kind of to the left of the frame. And then we're going to do all our lighting from essentially the other side, at least the key lighting from the other side. And then this is because we want to shoot on the shadow side. So here's our light right here. This is not technically the correct light, but I'm going to be using my Amaran light with a aperture softbox. So if our light's over here, like what I don't like about this is it's going to give you such a flat look. And I know I've covered a lot of this in other lessons. So this just gives a much flatter look. So what we want to do is bring our lights over on this side of the talent, rotate it this way so that we're kind of getting a beam of light in here. Then we're shooting on the shadow side. So we're going to see all those nice details on their face. It's going to look a lot better. But initially, what I do like to do, this is a 4-foot Quasar light tube, which is bicolor, so you can adjust the white balance of it, but not the intensity, which makes it kind of hard. And they're also extremely hard to add directionality to, meaning it just kind of goes all over the scene. They're difficult to control, but they can give a good result because if you do them horizontally, they can do some nice like horizontal shadows, but no vertical shadows, which is interesting. So I always shoot with them like placed horizontally and not vertically, which is kind of how we have it here. Now, a really basic interview setup would be this right here, just a Quasar light tube or any light tube, honestly. And so if we're placed it horizontally, we're going to get nice shadows horizontally. And then it's going to be on the opposite side of our camera. So we're going to shoot on the shadow side, which is nice. So this would be like very, very basic. I have shot interviews like this. It doesn't look amazing, but it's better than nothing, and it's better than no lighting at all, that's for sure. So that's kind of one method you could go with. But I'm going to use a little larger light. So this is almost the same size as our light tube, but it's completely circular. And we're also going to put a grid on the front of it so that it's going to add a lot of directionality. It's not going to spill all over the room. So that's kind of what we're going to go with, is like this right here, probably something like that. And that's what I usually like doing with something like that, a big softbox with some diffusion and a grid on the front. So these are the only really 2 lights I have besides my Amaran cob light with a softbox. Is a Quasar, and then a little Aperture MC, which is full RGB. It's an awesome little light, battery powered, but it's just a tiny little LED panel. So those are my 2 options. But really all I'm trying to do is give a nice soft key light that's going to be really big, and it's going to be fairly balanced to the white balance on the camera, so it's going to look fairly white. And then I also always want to try and backlight if I can. So an option here would be to use the window as backlight, which might work, but again, that light's going to be changing, and I don't know if I necessarily want to shoot up against the windows. So what I can do is use one of these other lights as a backlight, and that's just going to add a nice outline to our subject. People have differing thoughts on this, but I like to do this pretty much directly across from our main key light, so with our subject in the middle, just because I feel like you see it a little more since it's on the camera side. So say we do that with our light tube, which is going to be pretty bright because, like I said, they aren't out of the box adjustable in intensity. but maybe we do it something kind of like this back here. So it's out of camera, obviously, but it's going to give us a nice highlight on their side right here, which is going to be really visible by our camera. So obviously with these like out of the way, this is a great setup. This is what I use for a lot of videos, not necessarily with the tube light, but with this main softbox here, and then some kind of light in the background just to give a nice outline. This is a really, really solid setup for testimonies, especially if you're in a big room and a lot of this light isn't spilling onto the background. But obviously we could swap this out for a little MC panel. It's going to be aimed like this way, the exact same way. And we could even throw this on a C-stand and get it obviously higher than our subject, because I want it to kind of hit the hair. A lot of people call it a hair light because it'll kind of highlight the back of their head. So we don't want that to be coming like lower than their head and aiming up. We want to get that high and even be higher than our subject and aiming down. That would be awesome too. So how are we actually going to light our testimony tomorrow? Well, sometimes these can be too bright depending on the setting, but I think I'm going to try to use this as a backlight. We have a lot of room, so we can move it back if we need to, but I also don't want it to just light up the whole background. I want to not distract from our subject in our frame. So we'll kind of see how that goes. It's possible I may just use this little panel just to do a nice backlight, because our source back there doesn't need to be huge. But whichever one I don't use, say maybe our quasar works well back there, then maybe this panel I'm going to throw like over here, something like that, and change it to a color and just shine it on our background. So this is going to add some more depth in the background, because it's just going to illuminate something that's really far back. So you're really going to see how like expansive that background is. That's kind of what we call a background light. All right, now this all sounds great in theory, I know, but it's more important to even put it into practice and shoot our testimony. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're here today in the church that I work full-time at, the Refuge Church, in this kind of event space. So it's kind of got a stage and stuff like that, and some windows over on this other side. So pretty much the first thing that I'm trying to do whenever I come into a location and we're shooting a testimony, obviously, is I'm trying to figure out what's the best angle that I can capture. So if we're limited to this space, just this room, then I'm kind of looking around at every angle. Where can I get the most like depth in the background, and where can I get the most interesting background? Because we could just go for like a blacked out room and put our subject like right in the middle, and then kind of make it just really isolated and not see any of the background. So that's an option, and we'll kind of look at that with lighting. But I do want to see if there's a cool background that I can use, and then I can actually light it and make it a little more visible than we otherwise would. So when we're just in here, we kind of have like a sound booth in the back, which is cool wood, but I don't know if I really want to show that. And then over here, there's like some bathrooms. Otherwise, that wall and the doors are cool, but then we have some more doors with windows on them, as well as exit signs, which are always tough because you can't really turn them off. So you're always going to get that red sign unless you want to remove it in editing. And then kind of some more doors, as well as like the stage and everything. And then this wall is tough because there is a lot of like natural light, and luckily the shades are down, which is great. So I'm probably just going to try and like kind of ignore a lot of these windows. So I'm not going to need to like shape the light from the windows, because that is going to change. And a lot of testimonies we're filming for like 20 or 30 minutes at a time. And a lot of the window light outside can change even if the sun goes behind a cloud. It's just going to get darker. That's going to make things a lot harder. So probably going to avoid this side as well as back there with the bathrooms and stuff like that. So initially when I come in here, I think I'm going to try and aim primarily this way, maybe where we can cut off those doors, or at least a little bit of them, and the exit sign. And then part of the stage is fine. Even the projector is kind of cool in the background. But I think in this space, I'm going for something a little more neutral, and maybe I'm not going to highlight so much of the background just because it's just pretty typical like event space, which is great. But we'll look at how we can kind of work with what we have when we get more to lighting. So that's kind of what I'm thinking whenever I come into a space that we're going to be filming in. Really is just like, what can I use in the background, or do I want to use the background at all? So if there's a larger space like this, we do have the option of kind of isolating our subject a lot more and just kind of using it as like an infinite black shadowy background. which could be kind of cool. So the second thing that I'm going to do is using our position that we're going to focus on right now is I'm going to set up 2 chairs, which we'll talk about why in a minute, but one for our subject and one for our interviewer per se, which is going to be me, and then our tripod, so we kind of get a shot set up right off the bat so we can see what it looks like even with all the overhead lights on, which it's going to look a lot better after we set up some lights, but we'll kind of get a base shot set up right away. Okay, so I have these 2 chairs. Now the big thing that I want to keep in mind is I'm going to be shooting off to the side of our subject, so they're not going to be looking directly at the camera, where if that was the case I would just put the tripod looking straight in that direction, which I am going to do, but our position of our chairs and our tripod are going to be a little different. So I'm going to take our 2 chairs and probably put one of them like right around there for our subject, and then the other one kind of right here. So I'm going to be able to sit here and just talk to our subject that's going to be giving their testimony, and then then I'm going to try and position our tripod kind of here, so they're still looking off camera, but I'm going to be like looking at the background that we are wanting. So I'm going to grab my tripod, which is a pretty cheap tripod, but it works for the camera that I'm using. It's pretty light, so that's all right. So I'm kind of thinking like here, I'm going for like a medium to wide shot because I only have one camera, so I'm going to go probably knees up-ish, and then we can crop in and post and make a second camera out of it. But if I was using another camera, I would probably just put the tripod like here and then zoom in a lot closer on their face, maybe like shoulders up or something like that. But that's what we have to work with today. So I think that'll be pretty good right here. And I also love that we set up in a corner, because that's just going to get you a lot more depth looking to your subject instead of just looking at like a flat wall. We kind of got some lines like leading into the corner. So since the only camera we have is the one that I'm recording right now on, I'm just going to kind of swap back and forth between the tripod, and then I'm going to have my wife, who's going to be giving her testimony today, sit down, and so we can kind of just right off the bat with the natural lights in this room from the ceiling, just kind of see where we're sitting at position wise, and maybe adjust a little bit from there, but then we'll bring in some lights and see how we can make it look even better. Okay, so just initially putting my camera on the tripod, I can tell we already want to zoom in a good bit, as well as probably raise up a little bit, because I always want my camera to be positioned almost directly at their eye line, depending on the angle, obviously. So I'm going to raise up just a little bit, maybe like that. And then I'm going to zoom in. We're filming the behind the scenes at like 24 millimeters. So maybe we'll come into like 35 or a little more, something like that. And then I'm going to come up just a little bit to kind of position her on like the right third, since she's going to be looking frame left at me sitting down. That's going to give us like a good, decent camera 1, camera A shot. And then now we're going to bring in some lights and then see how we can make this look even better. So we talked about quite a few lighting setups back in the pre-production section of this lesson of the testimony shoot. So I'm just going to kind of show a few of those and kind of show the results that you can get. This is kind of the setup that I have right now. So one 4-foot Quasar light tube, which is bi-color, so it's adjustable. A few C-stands, a light stand and stuff. And then I have a Amaran 200X, which is pretty bright, as well as like a light dome and stuff. So we'll show that all in a minute, but this is a super versatile setup for testimonies. You can do a ton with just 2 or 3 lights, which is kind of what we're going to work with today. The first one that I wanted to show is this 4-foot Quasar light tube. These things are awesome. I like to position them horizontally, very professionally rigged here with Velcro cable ties. Ideally, we would probably have like a super clamp or something to actually kind of hold it onto the C-stand, but this works just fine for today. So this is where I'm going to kind of bring it over. So I know right off the bat, immediately when I come into any shoot, is I'm going to have our subject's eye line facing this chair, obviously, and I'm going to have my camera placed on one of their sides, could be either one, doesn't matter, and then I'm going to have our main bright key light coming from the other side, and I'll show you what kind of the difference is, but mainly I just want to be lighting the on the opposite side that I'm filming on. So I'm filming the shadow side of their face, so you don't have that like phone flashlight, like direct light kind of effect. And so if the light's coming from over here and you're filming from this side, you're gonna get those nice like shadows on their subject's face, which is awesome. This is super basic, but this is how I set up. So I'm gonna plug this in real quick and then we'll kind of see what this tube looks like. And then obviously we always wanna use our sandbags on C-stands. You always put it on the tallest leg so that it is, all the weight is on there. If you put it on one of the shorter ones, it kind of leans on the ground and kind of loses the effect. So sandbag, tallest leg. Now you're not going to hit your subject with your light in the middle of the shoot. Before I switch this on, I do definitely want to, oh shoot, that's not working. Dang it. So before I actually switch on our Quasar light tube over here, I do want to turn the house lights off because I just want to see what it looks like with pretty much no lights on, and then we'll just turn this on to see kind of what it looks like. So pretty bright, and then I can adjust the color temperature over here. I like to put these at like 4400. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the camera on the tripod and have our interviewee sit down so we can actually see what this looks like. All right, with our camera put in the exact same position, all the lights are off, so the only light we have is our Quasar tube light on. And I can already see it's just a little bright on her face. Obviously we can adjust that with like our ISO or something, but we're getting like a little more shadow on the far side of her face than I'd kind of want. So I'm just gonna slide it towards the camera a little bit to kind of eliminate some of those shadows. Okay, that looks a little better. So that's not bad. I honestly may just bring it in to her just a little bit, because obviously the closer it is to our subject, the bigger it is kind of gonna appear. So that's gonna obviously give us a softer light the further we are in, and then we can obviously take our exposure down, and that's not bad. So if you're kind of looking to where I would be sitting, then I would say this is pretty good. So we could even move around, zoom in for like a closer shot. I mean, at the very least, like this is lit. There's obviously a lot more that we can do to it, but this just goes to show you can get some really cool results just from a simple light tube, which is about $100. Now let's also see kind of what this looks like if I scoot it a little further away, get some more shadow on her face. So that's obviously going to give us a little moodier look. Now I also may come up with this a little more, so we're kind of coming from above, which is generally more flattering than lighting someone's face from below their face or their eye line. That's not bad. That's gonna give us like kind of a more dramatic look for our interview, but we are kind of getting a cool like Rembrandt look from her, the shadow side of her cheek. So I would record with this if I only had one light. This is probably the best result. I like this. It's a little more dramatic. We're not getting a ton of light in the background, which is nice because I don't want it to be completely blown out. I want to keep the focus on our subject here, and she is like the brightest thing in the frame. So I think that's great. All right, so obviously we're also not going to use this close of a shot because I did want to go a little wider and have the ability to crop in. So maybe something like that is what we'll actually go with. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, we're gonna kind of continue to build on this, but I wanted to at least show you the kind of results you could get with just a $100 4-foot adjustable light tube, and I don't think that's too bad. But once we have a kind of a wider shot like this, you can see already a lot of the light is coming in on the ground behind her. So you can see there's a lot of spread. There's pretty much no directionality from the light, which is really the big issue with these light tubes. One is that they're only soft in one direction because they're really thin and horizontal or vertical depending on where you put it. But the other issue with it is it's really hard to focus the light in one specific spot. So right now we're kind of just getting this giant beam of light that's around the whole area. So we're going to talk about a few other methods of lighting that's going to give you a little more directionality, as well as what I'm actually going to do to light this scene and give it a little more contrast and make it a little more interesting for our testimony. Okay, so since we still have our Quasar tube set up, I wanted to really quick show kind of how I would shoot this with a very little budget. And that would be obviously as this has a key light because it's going to give us some nice soft shadows, at least horizontally, which I think is more important. So you could obviously put it vertically, but I don't like that. I think then you got really harsh shadows like this way. And since we're kind of shooting horizontally. That's kind of how I like to do it. And then the only other thing I would add is a backlight, which is huge. You'll definitely see the difference when I put the camera on it, but this is just a little Aperture MC, which is awesome because it's battery powered and magnetic and full RGB color, anything you want. But I just have it set to like a white balance, which is just 3200 Kelvin. I like to have my backlight or hair light, whatever you want to call it, warmer than my key light. I just think it has a nice kind of cool orange glow and adds that to our subject. I'm gonna kind of position this, probably it's kind of a similar height right now, but I'm gonna try and position this higher than our key lights because mainly we want to like kind of light the top of our subject's head and a little bit of their body, like kind of outline them in a nice light on the back. And what this is really going to do, and what you hear people say all the time, is just to separate our subject a little more from the background, which is huge. So it's going to add a little more depth, some more contrast, as well as some color contrast, because it's going to be different than our main key light. So this is kind of how I have it positioned right now. Our subject is almost directly in between our backlight and our key light. So that's kind of how I like to do it, because then this is on the same side of our subject as the camera, and I like to just see more of the backlight. But people kind of have differing opinions. You can put it on the same side as the key light, which would just be over on this side essentially. I find that's harder because we're kind of dealing with the camera, so you can put it here, but I like to put it on the direct opposite side. That's just going to give us a little more contrast because our lights are in kind of opposing directions and really kind of back behind our subject. So looking at it now, I think I'm going to scoot it a little farther back, because what I don't want is that little light to come around and highlight our subject's nose. I don't think that's really good. So with our subject like sitting down right here, we kind of want to hit the side outline of them, as well as like kind of the top of their hair or top of their head. So maybe something like that. I'll probably come back just a little bit more like there, and then raise up just a little bit. And we can obviously kind of tilt this down, but I want to get it a little higher and add a little more contrast from above. So that's kind of my thought. We'll adjust it a little bit once we put the camera on, but I'm going to go ahead and turn off all of our house lights again and just turn these two on. Okay, so starting again from scratch, just really quick so we can kind of build each light on. The only light we kind of have is this bluish light from outside from the windows. So I'm going to go ahead and switch our main key light on. So we've got a setup just like we did just a minute ago, but again, no backlight. So I'm going to go ahead and turn our backlight on and see what kind of difference we're making. So it's pretty subtle. It's not probably as different of a color as I'd like it. Sometimes you can do kind of fun stuff, but it's at about half brightness right now. So we can either obviously increase our brightness or we can move it closer. So I'll probably do a little mixture of both. I'm going to move our light in a little closer and probably a little more off to the side of our subject, because I don't necessarily want it to just be a hair light and just have it behind her. I kind of want it to wrap around. I think that's looking a little bit better. That's giving us just a little bit of contrast and a little bit of outline here on her right side, on the frame right side. So you can see if we're off, it's pretty isolated, but then if we're back on, you can see just a little bit of highlight on that right side. So we can even play with some cool different colors, like a blue or something. And then we also have some different colors actually in the house lights, which is neat. So just goes to show figuring out kind of what you're working with can be really huge. So even kind of like a blue light might be kind of cool. Probably not a dark red or orange or something like that, but maybe like a light blue or something that'll kind of match her pants would be neat. So maybe something like that. That could be cool. We can also just go like orange, which is kind of similar to like our just regular like lower tungsten orange. It's not super bright. I would probably bring in like a little brighter light, but that'll work pretty well for now. So how about right now, let's go for like a lighter blue in like a lower intensity. All right, so that's not looking bad. I'm actually probably gonna go see some of the other colors that we have available just in the room, because I think that can sometimes add a cool look. Probably a little too blue, so I probably won't do that, but it is kind of matching the color that we are backlighting with. So just some more options. I would always like kind of look at what you have available in the room, but I'll just stick with our main lights off right now and just kind of our 2 light setup. So let's see if we can get this just a little bit brighter by moving it in a little bit. It's kind of just off to the side. If I zoom out here for a second, kind of see where we are. I think that's cool. I kind of like the blue look. That's kind of neat. So that is something we could run with. We're going to keep kind of adding to this setup. But that's how I would kind of light a scene if we could just have two lights. One can be really small as a backlight because we don't necessarily need a huge soft light, but the other one I would try and make soft, at least horizontally. So a light tube can work really well for that. Kind of moving along in our lighting progression. Now, I hope at least a lot of that is helpful. I didn't initially intend to kind of include all that extra information. That's not how we're actually going to shoot the testimony, but I hope at least that's kind of helpful to you. So moving along, this is actually what we're going to shoot the testimony with, this light. This is my Amaran 200X, which is an amazing light. I would say one of the best value lights out there because it's really bright and it's also bicolor, so color temperature adjustable basically. And then I have a Light Dome 2 from Aperture, which is great. I think these are awesome. They're easy to set up and also really big. So it's going to give us some nice soft light. It's not quite as long as our 4-foot Quasar light tube, but it is bigger in all sorts of directions, so it's a little better in that regard. Now obviously you can see it's just completely flat on the front, and I like to always use the more diffused fabric that comes with this. There's like a thinner one, but our 200X has plenty of power, so I'm going to use the bigger diffusion that's going to be a little bit softer. So with this, I always like to kind of angle these down just a little bit. We can always change it, but you can see I'm starting off just a little bit down. So I'm going to put this really similar to where our light tube was. And obviously, pretty much the closer I can get it to my subject, the better. Obviously, that's just not going to be in camera. That's kind of the goal, but I'm probably going to try and move it even closer. If I go up enough, probably still tilt down a little bit because I'd definitely rather be, like we talked about a minute ago, lighting kind of from the top than even straight on. It's just going to give us a nice, lot more pleasing shadows on our subject's face. So sometimes, honestly, it's easier for me to just sit down in the chair because I'm going to be able to easily see where our light is pointing. So I can see kind of where we are right now. I know we definitely can probably come in more for sure. So somewhere like there, that might not be a really bad position. Now, I definitely want to keep the similar setup that we had, which is really just like our main key light, which is going to be big and nice and diffused, as well as a backlight. And from what we've covered already, we have 3 lights essentially, and they're all for different various purposes. This light dome is the best for a key light, obviously, because it's going to be the biggest. We have our Quasar tube as well as our little Aperture MC. So I'm kind of going to play around and see what works best with this. I'd love for the light tube to be a nice backlight because it is kind of big, but my worry is that it's going to be a little too bright for a backlight and it's just going to completely like wash out our frame with light. So it's possible we'll use our MC as a backlight, but let's kind of see at least how our light dome looks on camera before we get into that. And we'll just kind of start building back on with our light dome instead of the tube light. Now just 8% and at 6,500 Kelvin, so I'm going to turn that down to like 53 or 54. Just is softer all around, honestly, especially vertically because the tube is just so thin. So I'm going to just kind of play with the position just a little bit. The white balance on my camera is adjusted to the room right now, which is a little bluer, I would say. So I'm just kind of going to adjust this one. Generally, in my experience, warmer light just looks better on people than colder light. All right, so right there, we're at like 4,500 Kelvin, and that's a good middle point just for where our camera white balance is at right now, and that's pretty decent. So that's pretty nice. I think I honestly may bring it back out just a little bit, which is just part of the process is just kind of moving lights around because it's really hard to, even if you know what you're going to set up lighting wise, you're always like kind of moving it around slightly to get exactly what you're wanting. Obviously, the closer that it is to her, the softer it's going to be, which is our goal. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to zoom in to see kind of what our like close-up shot is, which is looking really good. So maybe I'll leave that there as we play with our backlight so I can kind of see how it's looking on the back of her. Our light dome is super low brightness right now, so we can give it obviously a lot more, but let's kind of see the balance that we're working with since these Quasar tubes aren't dimmable, which is kind of tough. So it's not quite as bright as I was initially thinking it's going to be. Now, another super important thing to remember is that we're always kind of going to work away from the things that we can't control. So right now, like that Quasar light tube is a pretty good distance in the back. If I zoom all the way out, kind of see where we are position-wise. We have our big key light right here, and then over there we have our tube light. all the way in the back. So say we can't go any further, what we can do to make that light appear brighter, quote unquote, is to actually raise the brightness of our light dome. So then we can lower our in-camera exposure, and that's gonna make everything kind of seem darker. So let's go up with our brightness on our light dome here. Then we can go down on our exposure in camera. Zoom back in a little bit, and you can see with the before and after that our backlight is actually a whole lot dimmer. So honestly, at this point, I'm thinking I may even bring this in just a little bit, just because we got so much brightness back. So right now I'm probably like half the distance, and I'm actually gonna see if we can go a little warmer, just because I think it's a cool look. And then I'm gonna probably double the height as well. Don't forget sandbags. Cool, I think that's great. Right away, I'm gonna try and move our light a little further, just so you can kind of see where we're working with right now. I think I'm gonna try and move our light tube behind her a little bit more, so it's gonna get a little more of the top of her head and a little bit less on the side. Since we're a little higher, I think that'll work a little bit better. Maybe like there, let's see how that looks. I think that's nice. I think we will probably go with that. I think that'll be really cool. So we got kind of a nice warm light on the side of her face. So you can see kind of on the ground, we have a lot of spill happening. So a lot from like our warm quasar light in the background, and then a lot from our main key light. And I can't solve that from the quasar unless I had another light, but I can from our key light. And that's gonna be actually using a grid or an egg crate or whatever it is you wanna call it, that I'm gonna put up in front of here. That's gonna basically just direct the light extremely focused forward, and it's gonna help it to not spill all over the room. So essentially, if I'm standing like right here, I can still see the light. So that light is still gonna hit me, but I'm gonna quickly throw this up and you'll kind of see the difference. All right, pretty quick and easy. So you can see right away, if I'm standing in the same spot, I'm not seeing nearly as much of the light as I was a second ago. So even on the ground, I can see I'm barely getting any light spill on the ground. It's really just a lot more focused kind of around the chair and a lot around our subject, which is the goal. For this, it's even more important for the light to be focused directly on our subject, because you're not gonna get a lot of spill to the outside. So let's see what the difference looks like on camera. Yeah, so I can see straight away, we're getting a lot more like focused light. We're not seeing a lot more around her. So this is gonna really isolate her a lot. If I turn off our backlight here, you can see just how dark the rest of the frame is, which is a really interesting look. So again, just different kind of techniques for you to consider. For this shoot, I'm gonna throw back on the backlight, because I always want that little outline around our subject. I think the key light is in a pretty good spot. I think I honestly may raise our ISO just a little bit. I think I'm gonna move back our tube light a little more. Now this is always the battle, because I always feel like I need to just keep adjusting stuff. But at some point you kind of gotta call it good and go ahead and film. All right, so as we kind of wrap up the lighting, because I'm pretty happy with how we are, at least right now, just with a nice key light and a nice backlight. I am gonna throw our little Aperture MC, which is the third light that we have available. And I'm gonna kind of use this as a background light. So this one is great for background light, honestly. It's pretty much perfect because it's completely adjustable, as well as battery powered and magnetic. So it's pretty much the perfect light just to be able to throw anywhere in our frame. But I kind of just want to add a little bit of color into the background and try and make it a little more interesting. So let's kind of see if this will work or not. So let's go ahead and flip it on. I think we're still to like a nice blue. So I'll increase like our saturation. Maybe we use this cool blue. Bring the intensity down a little bit. Maybe I even set it somewhere a little off frame, just shining like some blue light into the background. So we're just barely in frame here, so I'm gonna scoot our stand back a little bit. All right, I think that's actually kind of cool. I might go with that. It's not a super motivated light per se, because it is blue and we only have like an orange light coming from the background. But I think it'll help just to add a little bit of visual interest. I might move it up a little bit just towards our backlight, so we're not getting any kind of crazy shadows on like the door handle or anything like that. Yeah, that's cool. That adds just a little bit. You can also obviously swap our background light with our backlight, just depending on the kind of look you're going for. But I would say this is a really solid 3-light setup for a testimony. So now that we've got our lighting pretty much dialed in, we're gonna start working on audio, which hopefully will not take as long as lighting, that's for sure. Really all that I'm working with here is I just have a C-stand that I'm gonna use to hold up our boom pole. So overall, I'm gonna set up a shotgun mic on a boom pole. So boom mic, aim that at our subject as close as possible. A lot of what we talked about in the audio section. And then I'm gonna use the lav mic that I'm wearing right now just so you can hear me onto her, so that we can actually kind of have two sources as a backup just in case anything happens with either of them, as well as just in case one of them sounds better, because sometimes these shotgun mics pick up a lot more noise in the room, which I kind of want to avoid. What I'm gonna do first is position our C-stand that we're gonna use to mount our boom pole on. So what I like to do with this is go a little bit to the side of our camera, because this can kind of be wherever. Some people go more like straight on. But really what we can do is come out with our boom pole and kind of mount it on here and just angle it down. So we don't need to like come here and like angle it forward. So that's kind of what I like doing more, is going more like here and just coming in from the side. So let's go ahead and do this. Now there are specific like boom pole holders, which I haven't messed with a ton, but I do really like this solution that I have here, which is just a boom pole as well as like a pretty cheap boom pole holder. These are like 20-30 bucks or something like that. And these can just go in the C-stands that hopefully you already have. So nice and sturdy, and then throw a sandbag on there. And then our boom pole, which is just gonna kind of sit in there like that. So all the weight's gonna be on this end, pretty basic. Extend this out, and as I extend it, I like to give it a little more room in the back. The mic that we're using today is the one that I just recently got, but I think it's probably the best value shotgun mic you can get because it's super versatile. This is the Sennheiser MKE 600, I think, or MKH or something like that. So it's XLR. It can be mounted on your camera, or it can be mounted to a boom pole or something like that, as well as you can put a battery in it if you don't have phantom power. So overall, just super versatile. But I'm gonna be plugging it into my Zoom H5 for today, which is just straight XLR. So I can see right away, like if I sit down in here, it's not in a bad position. I know I want to angle it a little more this way, as well as probably get it up, because that might be in the camera frame. Now it's a lot easier to mount these if the camera is actually on our tripod and we can see the frame, because really I'm just trying to get this as close as possible without actually being in the camera. So that's a good starting place at least. I think we're gonna have to just raise up a little bit and then just angle a little more towards the middle of our chair. And then all I'm gonna do next is just kind of wrap an XLR cable down the pole so it's not hanging in the way of anything. And then I have our Zoom H5, which is an awesome recorder, probably one of my favorites in Zoom's lineup, just because it's pretty simple. There's no crazy like menu interface or anything like that. It's really basic, but anyway, it's just a simple recorder that can do pretty much everything you need, and it's pretty cheap. So that's kind of my favorite. That's the one that I'm always using. And a really cheap tripod, because you never know when you need a cheap tripod, and they come in handy pretty much for this exact purpose, just so I can sit there. So I'll probably kind of position this one somewhere like there, just so I can see while I'm sitting there interviewing if either our camera or my mic cuts off, or if they end up like peaking on the audio. I want to see that right away. So just being able to position it somewhere within the field of view is nice. I like to kind of plug the mic in first and then run our cable, so I don't get a whole bunched up cable all the way at the mic. And this mic is phantom powered, so I have a battery in there, but the mic itself is switched off because it's going to be pulling phantom power from our input on our recorder. So we can see right away, I don't think we're getting any signal. That's just because our input 1 is selected, so I'll just select input 2, and then we're definitely getting a good level there. So we'll go ahead and adjust this a little more once we have our interviewee sit back down and get a good audio level for actually her dialogue, because I could sit there and talk, but that's not going to be accurate for what we're actually trying to capture. And then the last thing in audio is, I think I mentioned, but I'm just going to hook up my lav mic to her, just so we have two sources of audio. Typically lav mics, I would say, tend to be a little more dry. There's not a lot of like room noise, which can be a good thing, but it also can be a little more isolated kind of. So our shotgun mic's going to give us that full room noise, And sometimes I even like to kind of mix both of them in post. So we'll talk about that whenever we get to editing this testimony. But yeah, that's kind of my thought process. I like to have 2 different ones just so we have a different sound for each in case one, and also in case one dies. So always good to have a backup. So I think that is pretty much wrapping up our audio. The only other things I'm going to do is just set our level for our lav mic as well as our shotgun mic to sit kind of below -6 to -12 dB in general. So if anybody like kind of gets excited and goes up in volume, then we're gonna have a little bit of leeway in there. And then I also always have headphones on set because I'm always either wearing them or at least wearing them to test. But having somebody wear headphones is always really helpful, just really so you can hear what's happening. I'll kind of wear them for a few minutes as we test out audio and stuff to see if any mic is making like a buzzing sound or something just crazy. But also I try to wear them while we're recording as well, in case like an AC kicks on or something like that, or there's like a loud noise outside that you can actually hear. I want to know that in the moment so I can go ahead and have our subject like repeat what they just said. That's pretty much it. So headphones always good to have so you can listen to your mics before and during while you're recording. Okay, so before we actually get into the interview, I promise that's coming here in a minute. I just have a few things that I want to talk about. I just vaguely named this the art of the interview because testimonies that I filmed are really just interviews. I'm really kind of just trying to sit across from the person, have a conversation, and draw their story out, make them feel comfortable, all those things. So I have a few notes that I wanted to share that kind of relate to the art of the interview as to how I ask questions. Just some more theory-based stuff on talking about filming interviews. So first one, which is probably the most key thing, is to be fully present. This is exactly why I plan out questions, because I don't want to be thinking, just like in a normal conversation, I don't want to be thinking about how what my next question is going to be, what I want to ask about what she just said. I want to keep that to a minimum. I want to plan out my questions pre-interview, like we talked about, have a good idea of their story beforehand. So I'm not sitting there trying to think of my next question. I want to actually be listening, engaging, and active listening, right? Just in a normal conversation. And the next one I know I've talked about before, but definitely have you or someone else sit down and interview them. I like to do it personally just because I am going to be the one editing most of the time, and so I can just immediately know what's going to be a good clip, how I'm going to kind of cut this together. But if you have like a director on set or something, maybe they're going to want to do it. So that's totally fine, but just having somebody sit there and talk to them, I've found 90% of the time is very helpful, and the other 10% of the time people kind of have their story like memorized, and if they're just going off of memory, sometimes they don't want to be looking directly at someone. Sometimes they just need to like stare at the wall and just recite from memory, which is generally doesn't give the best results. It's not the most natural thing, but that can happen sometimes. The next thing, which we'll talk about in a second once we actually sit down, the only rule that I give people beforehand before we actually start filming is to just answer in complete sentences to the best of your ability. Now, I try to gear my questions that I've come up with to be open-ended. I'm not looking for any yes or no answers for sure, but I rarely in final edits of testimonies include my questions. I know that's kind of a documentary style, and I have a few times, but generally I just want them to speak and share their story, so I'm trying to have them answer in complete sentences so you don't need to hear my question. So really that's just restating the question within their answer. So that's kind of the only direction that I give them before we start filming. And a few other quick ones: help them feel comfortable, whatever they need, just kind of be cool, calm, and collected on set. I wouldn't try and rush around, at least when your talent shows up, trying to set stuff up, because it's just going to make them even more nervous. So try and be relatively calm and comfortable. Your job is primarily just to draw their story out and not try and add or subtract anything away from it. Your job is really just to draw their story out and not add too much into that with your own discussion. So I would try and just focus just on them. All right, and then the very last tip that I want to share as far as just interviewing goes is to ask follow-up questions. Come up with some on the spot if you can, which is why we prepare with questions, so we can be spontaneous and come up with questions on the spot, have a real dialogue and discussion with our subject. This gives a much more natural feel, and do your best to kind of hone in on interesting things. That's the whole reason why I'm trying to sit across from my interviewee, for my subject, even for testimonies, because I do want to try and ask questions, dive deeper into things that I want to hear more about. So stuff like that, all with kind of keeping the edit in mind, since I'm going to be the one editing. So that's super, super helpful.
Like, should I pause between thoughts if I'm trying to think? Like, is it better to, if you ask me a question and I'm trying to piece together like 3 different thoughts, do I wait till I say all of them, or do I like start with my first thought and then pause when I'm thinking of the next thing and then keep going?
As far as like editing goes, it's much easier to have like a larger gap. So don't be afraid if you need like to take a second to just like to sit and think, and then just kind of go back into what you're talking about. That's totally fine. I would rather you do that than try and like just stumble through into the next thought.
Okay.
So don't be afraid if you need to like take breaks or anything like that. All right, so we just finished filming the testimony and it was awesome. She did really, really good. I think it's gonna edit together really well. But before we get on to the editing, I want to cover just 1 or 2 really quick things and then do some B-roll filming. So that'll be really cool. But one thing I noticed, and this kind of plays into a bigger idea, which is that things are always gonna go wrong, or maybe not even go completely wrong, but just things may not always be completely up to your perfect expectations, which is often the thing that I struggle with. So even as we're filming, I'm looking over and realizing like, oh shoot, maybe I should have like raised the camera up even just a little bit more to get it more on like her eye level, so it's not like kind of aiming from like chest level. It's not like a deal breaker, but it's just something then throughout the whole rest of the testimony, I'm just sitting there like looking at the camera like, I wish I could just raise it up. But most of the time, if I end up doing that, it just makes it harder in editing, because then I'm having to like readjust halfway through because my position is all off. So I would just encourage you to set up as best as you possibly can, and then just roll with it, man. Nothing's ever gonna be perfect, at least not to my standards. I can often have really high standards for myself. So I would encourage you to just kind of roll with it. I think most of the time, if you set really high standards, most of the time the point that you actually reach is probably 90-95% there, and that's typically good enough for most uses. So just wanted to at least convey that and kind of give you something that I noticed right away as we're filming that I would like to improve. So I kind of wanted to just throw that at you in a bigger kind of concept that nothing's ever going to be perfect. So don't let that stop you from trying to create great work. And then lastly is we're gonna go film some B-roll real quick, which is really just gonna be in a different location, because I don't want to do it here, probably outside somewhere. And I think I just want to film a few things that kind of relate to her story, as well as just some generic stuff just to break up just the sitting and talking at the camera or at the interviewer, and break up some of that footage. So that's really the point. And another big benefit of B-roll is to be able to hide cuts in the edit as well. So I'll talk about this a lot more in editing, but being able to hide the cuts with multiple cameras and or B-roll is really good, because that just kind of keeps your audience engaged in what you're trying to communicate, and a little less focused on how edited this video is, because everything's pretty edited, but the goal is to try and make it as invisible as possible. So it's kind of the overall idea of why we want to capture B-roll. So we're gonna go somewhere else to shoot that, and then talk a little bit about what I'm shooting and why. With B-roll capture, I kind of just shot all the B-roll that I needed to get, but I figured it would be a little bit easier just to talk about it after the fact, and I'll kind of show some on screen as I'm talking about it. But really, I'm just trying to find stuff that kind of loosely relates to their story, and even if it's different, like I got some shots of the trees out here, so it just kind of relates to the B-roll, but it doesn't necessarily relate to her story specifically. Just capturing anything like that I think could be cool, just to kind of supplement her story and just provide some visual breakup just from her sitting down and talking directly at me or at the camera or anything like that. So a big thing for this, I shoot all interviews in 24 frames per second or 23.976 like we've talked about. And then any B-roll and stuff, I've shot some in 24 frames before, but typically I just shoot in 60 frames per second, so I can slow that down 40% to then match my 24 frames per second final output and our A-roll that I shot. So that's typically what I do, so I can do 40% slow motion, and then that'll give us some nice smoothness, and it'll also smooth out some of the shots, even though I was just handheld, because I kind of like that look, but being able to slow it down is going to help us stabilize some of those extra jerky movements and stuff like that. So I just kind of shot some of her reading our Bible, sitting outside, journaling a little bit, as well as her just kind of sitting looking at the sky. So I think it's pretty generic. It's nothing crazy, but just kind of help our story. And some, I know she mentioned one specific verse in Psalms, so I captured that in her Bible, which I think will be really cool to incorporate around that exact time. So all I was really trying to capture with B-roll is just some nice smooth shots. I like incorporating some motion in my shots, so that's kind of just me locking down the camera and just kind of moving back and forth slowly, so I just get a little bit of movement, and also putting some stuff in the foreground so we get just some nice depth in our shots as we're like seeing her journal or something, and then putting another chair or a little bush or something in the foreground just to make shots a little more interesting, something like that. And obviously capture a variety of like really close-ups as well as some wider establishing shots, so you can kind of see where the scene is that we're sitting. Sometimes I'll light B-roll shots, it kind of depends, but oftentimes like today it's pretty cloudy and kind of overcast, so the lighting is obviously like extremely soft and diffused just naturally, so I didn't really touch lighting at all today and just wanted to capture something kind of quick. All right, that's all I got as it relates to B-roll for this testimony. I'm gonna cover one more thing back inside, and then we're gonna get into editing. All right, so super fast before we get into editing this testimony. As of right now, I'm not planning to make a practical on announcements just because I didn't have enough different content between testimony and announcements. A lot of the fundamentals as far as the video production side of church announcements or VAs or whatever you want to call it, really didn't differ that much from a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about as regard to like framing, composition, camera settings, lighting, and audio. Those kind of being the main overarching things that we've talked about. So just really quickly, I wanted to give you a few really quick tips if you are shooting announcements. And since we just covered a lot on testimonies and things like that, really is just a few key differences that I wanted to hit on. And the biggest one is going to be just where your subject is addressing. So for like testimonies, your subject's kind of going to be off camera, or at least that's how I like to do it. That's kind of my personal style, and that's pretty similar as far as like interview setup, if you want to use that term. So for testimonies, that's what I'm going to be doing, because they're not necessarily addressing the viewer of this video, but for announcements they are. So it's going to look very similar to how I'm talking right now, because I'm trying to address the end target, the audience of this video. So the biggest thing, our subject is now going to be addressing the camera, addressing the end audience that's going to be seeing this video. And that means instead of them being like off to one side of the frame, they're going to be actually like looking straight directly in the camera and probably like just straight up centered. And then the next one is you probably want to avoid some overly like dramatic lighting setups like we covered a little bit earlier. We really just want to go for like a clean, flat look. There can be some shadows in their face. Like I like to keep things interesting and not just have a completely flat looking image of light straight ahead, although you can, but typically I avoid that for announcements just because it's not meant to be overly dramatic and moody and things like that. So that's pretty much it. You can go with a simple like 1 or 2 light setup. I find that just one like nice key light off to the side, as well as like a backlight with your subject in the middle of both of those lights, works really well. That's a super simple setup. I've done it a ton with just a single quasar tube that we've used a lot and that we started with in this video. So that's kind of it, and you can always bring that in further towards the middle if you want to get an even flatter look, which is just totally personal preference, but I thought I would just at least mention a few things that I do in regards to like kind of translating what we talked about with filming testimonies to filming announcement videos. So that's pretty brief, but hopefully that's helpful if you're filming both of those kind of videos. We've covered a ton in this testimony video already, but we still have a lot to do in regards to editing, even just cutting out the content, color grading, audio editing, and a lot more. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So the next step in our testimony practical journey that we're walking through is the editing. So that's what we're gonna be talking about for the next little while. We're gonna basically walk through the whole thing. I literally just have the footage imported, and we're gonna go through the entire export, and hopefully it'll be beneficial and valuable to you just to see my process for how I edit most videos, but more specifically a testimony. And there's a ton of similarities with how I edit a lot of other things. So we're gonna jump in and get started. So here I'm in DaVinci Resolve. I've made a new project, and then I've imported our A-roll and our B-roll. We have our A-roll right here, which is about 25 minutes long, we can see. And then we have our lav mic and our boom mic. So that's kind of what we have in our A-roll. B-roll, we have a lot of stuff that we captured outside, so that's available to us as well. But yeah, so quickly, I wanted to show you my project settings because I know we walked through a lot of that in the other lessons, but there's one or two key things that I've actually started to do differently I wanted to show you. So under color management specifically, still in DaVinci YRGB, but instead of using the timeline and output color space as Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, I've actually been using Rec 709A for both of them, which is just what I found. It's very similar to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, but really the only key difference that I've really noticed, it's really subtle, but it just changes the metadata of the final export to work a lot better with QuickTime. So if you have that weird gamma shift and QuickTime on a Mac, this is the closest I've ever gotten to changing it. And then the other thing is also going up to your DaVinci Resolve preferences under General and saying use Mac display color profile for viewers. So your Mac is going to have a little more control over the viewer in Resolve, which is going to give you a little more accurate result from what I found. So that's the only thing I really wanted to cover real quick before, because that's just giving me a lot more closer result from my color grading into viewing it in QuickTime, stuff like that. So those two things, I would give it a shot, see if it helps for you if you're on a Mac specifically. But we are going to just jump right into editing. So what I'm going to do first here is I'm actually going to kind of act like I use two cameras just in case you do, so I can show you my multicam workflow. But I obviously only did one, so we're going to cheat it just a little bit. I'm going to select all these, make a new multicam clip. Just call this Mandi's Story MC for multicam. I want to sync this by the sound. I don't like moving them to a new bin because I just want them all to stay right here. Channel can be auto, and we'll hit OK. So we're just going to sync our audio into a new multicam clip right here, and I always like to open this in the timeline so I can see exactly what it's doing and what angle each one is. I'm going to go ahead and just start all these at the same time. So I'm going to delete all these, and I know the time is all right at the beginning. And then what I'm actually going to do here is kind of rearrange these just because it's my personal preference. I want like the camera audio to be one, so camera one is my actual video. And then let's see, zoom is our boom. So I'll use this as camera 2, and then our lav mic will be 3. That's just the best way. I find like whatever you interpret this as in your mind is the best way to set it up, because instantly if I want angle 2, I know that's going to be my boom mic, because that's just the way that I assume it's going to be. So the easier you can make that, the better. And then what I'm going to do here is just duplicate this camera. So I'm kind of going to just act like we have two cameras when we only have one, which I don't actually really ever do. Most of the time I use two cameras if I'm at work or something, but I didn't have access to two cameras. So what I'm going to fake it here is just zoom in a little bit, and we can actually go pretty far if you're exporting in 1080p and not have any visible quality loss, which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to reframe a little bit. So this will just be like a little tighter shot, and if we use it, great, but if not, you know, no big deal. Something like that maybe. So if we enable it and disable it, it may honestly come in more. You can go pretty far in 1080p and not make it too noticeable, which is cool. I mean, source material 4K, and if you're exporting in 1080p, you have quite a bit of room to zoom in. I want to say you can go up to 2x zoom, so this could be up to 2 and not technically have any quality loss. I might be off on that, but I think it's pretty close. like that.
Victory over the grave.
Yeah, it's cool. That'll give us a little bit of a different angle, so we'll go with that. We have our audio set up and everything, so pretty cool. Now this is just our multicam sequence, obviously, so I'm gonna make a new timeline. I'm just gonna do her testimony, and then I'm gonna drag this out of this bin. I like keeping my multicam in the A-roll bin because that's, after a certain point, I'm not really gonna touch that anymore. But our main timeline, this is gonna be our like final export. I like to bring out of that bin and have it right here at the top. Angle 1, this is our camera. Angle 2 with the audio is the boom and her other angle. What I'm gonna do is unlink these just for simplicity because they don't really have to do with each other, because I'm only gonna use really angle 1 and 2 cameras. And I'm never gonna use angle 1 audio because that's our original camera audio, just for syncing up the tracks. What I'm gonna do here is kind of forget about the camera audio. I'm gonna leave angle 2 right here, and then I'm just gonna duplicate this multicam sequence. And then if you're using my keyboard shortcuts, I think Resolve comes a little differently, but I have it mapped to where you can hold Option and hit 1, 2, or 3, and it'll switch your angles on whatever you're selected, which is cool. But obviously, you can come over here to your split screen and open up multicam here. And then usually I only want to switch the video. So if we're playing and I hit 2 and 1, it's not going to switch our audio, which we obviously don't want. But usually I'll just control it manually. I pretty rarely will like play through and actually switch cameras on the fly. I'm usually doing that a lot more intentionally. So I'm going to just bring this back for right now. So let's stick with angle 1 on the video. These are all separate, so I'm gonna set this to be our boom mic. And then the third, I'm gonna hold Option and hit 3. That's gonna be our lav mic, or her lapel mic. So now this is a pretty good setup. So we have our 2 mics visible in the timeline. We have our main camera. We're in pretty good shape right now. So really in the process, what I'm gonna do, at least right now, is kind of just watch through this, get a little better idea of her story and how it communicated through video. And then kind of start to figure out the story that I want to develop through this video, really, is what I'm trying to do. So obviously there's a lot of different ways to go. I mean, some of this is probably just going to be trashed 2 minutes in, like we weren't really talking about anything, obviously. I'm really looking for these big gaps right here where I know there's a lot of content. But even with that, I reckon to say that's probably at least 15 minutes still of just straight content. And this video is not going to be 15 minutes long. Usually I'm trying to edit testimonies down. If they're showing on a Sunday service, I don't know, 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes is still on the longer side. But if there's a lot there, you can keep people's attention for that long. So it overall depends. But the point is, like, we're gonna have to cut a lot of this. And that's actually one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about, because I think you just kind of have to accept that there are parts of this story that are not actually gonna be seen by people. And obviously you can make a longer cut and upload it to YouTube, and people can view the longer one if they want, but only show a shorter version on social media or on a Sunday service. And there's a lot of options like that, and obviously those are all great. But for Sunday morning, like, you're just gonna have to accept that, like, a lot of her story, although it may be good, it may not be what people are actually going to see. And that is unfortunate, but that's just kind of the job you have as the videographer, and especially as the editor. That's really where a lot of this comes in. A lot of this is about prioritizing really what's best. So you're trying to get really the most concise story you can while still communicating the actual message that you want to communicate, or that she wants to communicate. So really what I'm going to do here is, I don't know if I'll leave this in or cut this out, but I'm just going to watch through. I'm really going to go through, and I have my shortcuts enabled, so I can hit, since these are all on auto track selector, I can have nothing selected, hit K, use my brackets like we talked about, and cut the beginning and end of clips, stuff like that. And obviously if I had music already here, I can just disable the auto track and it'll not cut those. So that's how I do it. I talked about that a lot in editing, so I'm not going to hit on that a ton here, but really I'm using K to cut, open bracket to set it to the beginning, and then end bracket to basically add like an end edit, and everything ripples back to the beginning, which is just a blazing fast way to edit, which is awesome. I'm going to kind of make a pass through this, listen to it a little bit, cut out really a lot of these gaps that I know we're just talking, or I'm kind of asking to get another question out and stuff like that, which I am not going to be putting in the final video. I just want her talking in there. So I'm going to be cutting a lot of that out, listening to a little bit of her story. So I may speed this up or leave it in, but that's kind of my next step of the process.
Should I pause between thoughts if I'm trying to think? Like, is it better to, if you ask me a question and I'm trying to piece together like 3 different thoughts,
And then I realized here, for the boom mic and our lav mic, those are both recorded as mono files. There's not stereo, but the camera audio was stereo, so it's kind of messing with us a little bit here. And really this one right here is, so if I play it.
wait till I say all of them, or do?
So if I play it right here, you can see our audio level over here is getting level, but it's only on the left. So I'm literally only hearing it out of my left speaker over here, which is obviously not what we want. So what I can do is right click on this track, change the type to mono, and then it's gonna only give us 1 bar over here. So then when we play it, it's gonna play that 1 mono file out of both sides. So I'm gonna need to do that to this one as well. But obviously our final file is gonna be stereo, and when we add music in, that'll be in a stereo track. But if I switch over to the Fairlight panel here real quick, and I turn this back to stereo, you can see it's grabbing like a stereo file from our multicam clip, but our audio is only in the left channel. So that's why we want to make both these mono, and now let's continue. So all that beginning was just intro and not a whole lot of talking. And really here, honestly, I use these waveforms almost entirely. And oops, you can see I already messed up here. If I undo, I forgot to re-enable the track selector. So I cut and then misaligned all our clips. So make sure all those are on if you want all these to like ripple edit. So I hit open bracket and it'll cut it to the beginning, or you can also hit K, select all these and like delete and then delete, but it's much faster obviously with the shortcut. So I'm using the waveforms a ton here and just looking for parts where I know she's talking. These quieter parts are definitely me talking off camera. So
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age. So my life before Christ, I can't remember a lot of it, but I do remember the moment of salvation, even though I'm pretty sure I was only like 5. It was really young. But I remember being in the car with my parents, and I grew up in a Christian home. I knew who Jesus was from church and from talking with them, but I knew I hadn't accepted him as my savior. And I remember being in the car, driving with my parents, I'm not sure where, but I remember thinking, I know I need Jesus, and I know I'm not perfect, and I know that I need a savior, and I know what Jesus has done for me, and I want my life to be for him. And I remember going home that night and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord and kind of having a really like childlike understanding of salvation. But I remember praying with my mom and asking Jesus to come into my heart and kind of marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God.
cool, that's great. I think she articulated that super well. I honestly really like her beginning couple words as like an intro. I kind of want to start with B-roll over this, and definitely it's really hard to tell the feel and the vibe of this when you're just listening to her audio and you don't have any music. But I think if we pick the right music, it's going to lay really, really well under a lot of what she just said. But that is a whole minute, so it's possible I may not use all that, but all that was really, really good. So I kind of envision this beginning right here in my mind. I'm like thinking of where this is going to sit, and especially I'm really looking for like an intro, because you can build the story off of there, but I want to have like a good start. I'm kind of picturing in my mind like some music and then a lot of B-roll, maybe just something that's pretty nondescript and non-specific, and then you kind of hear her start talking, and we don't see her sitting in this chair for a couple seconds until a couple lines in. So that's an option. I think that may be cool. So you can either hit M or hit Command M and just type like intro.
I remember.
So I can add a marker and add some notes basically. So that was great. I'm gonna skip past there.
I was about 5 years old when I accepted Christ.
So that's good. I think I asked like,
That's awesome.
Okay.
I think I asked what age she was, and she didn't mention it in there, which is fine. but I don't think I really want to cut in this like one sentence. That's kind of a little too short, and I don't think it's really relevant a lot, which is a big thing here. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going to be really good, but how we want to craft the story, I don't think her age is necessarily relevant because she mentions it was a young age. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that. Probably maybe start here.
Yeah, I always loved to read when I was young. Like getting into books was one of my favorite things. And so I became really interested in reading the Bible once I'd been saved and seeing the importance of God's word. And so even as a really young kid, like even second, third grade after I learned to read, I loved reading the Old Testament because it was full of stories, and stories was always something that captivated me. And so I began to really become more interested in like who God was, and I could tell that my heart was really bent on following him and doing the right thing. But I think the relational aspect of knowing that God really loved me and that I had a deep relationship with him didn't come until a lot later on in life.
Okay, that was pretty good. That's something we may cut out depending on how we want to like go about it.
Yeah, so even though I was reading the Bible a lot, even as
and her like kind of first
even,
couple words, I kind of want to cut. So I'll probably, if there's a good like gap right here.
Yeah, so even though.
So I think like right here, right into even would be better. So I'll go ahead and do that because I'll probably do it later anyway.
Even though I was reading the Bible a lot, even as a young kid, and I had that moment of salvation, I would say that I was kind of like a spiritual high Christian, where like I would just keep going until I'd hit this point where I'm like, oh yes, like I follow God. Whether that was summer camps as a middle schooler or even in high school, like serving a lot at church and being involved, but still just missing a depth of my relationship with the Lord where I was spending personal time with him. That just wasn't really there, honestly, until I got into college. And so my freshman year, I would say, is a big marking point in my life. I was moved away from home, away from the community that I had grown up with, and I really saw a picture of Christians who were sold out for God. They weren't really caught up in, every now and then I'll go to church and feel really good about like following God, and then I'll go back to the things I actually want to do. I just saw people who would wake up early, spend time with the Lord, fast and pray intentionally just to spend time with God. And that sparked something in me. It was kind of like the missing piece, I think, from a basic understanding of like, Jesus is my Savior. He died on the cross for my sins. Now I'll go to heaven with him. Instead, it took it to another level, where it's like, Jesus can change my life today. And like the choice that I have to spend time with him, to be in his word, to worship him, to pray, to bring those requests to God is something that I have to be intentional about each day. Otherwise, I won't look more like him. Otherwise, I'm missing the joy that he promises is for us today if we abide in him. And so I think that first year of college, being separated from some of the stuff that I grew up with and really having to own my walk with God really changed the trajectory of my life.
Okay, that was good. I honestly really liked this beginning, so I'm going to add a marker and hold Option. You can drag out to extend it. And I love like the first half of this because I love how she's talking about college and her first year and stuff, being like a spiritual high Christian. I think that would be really good to like lead into. But the last half may be able to like cut shorter and allow some more time for some of the rest of the stuff that she says. So we'll stick with that.
Yeah, so I think being saved at a young age was really important for me as a baby Christian, I would say, I think I would phrase giving my testimony from like when I first got saved when I was like 5 or 6 all the way up till now, is that early decision did set a foundation for me of really wanting to follow God. And so I think without that moment, I wouldn't have had as much of a care to follow God. And so I think it set me on the right path. But I think my frustration, even in like middle school and high school, was I didn't really feel like I knew how to be close to God. I felt like I would try to do the right things or be the good Christian or the girl that always did the right things, and kind of miss out on that closeness in my walk with God. And so I think like that defining moment really came in college when I chose for myself, I'm going to wake up early to read the Bible, and I'm going to choose to spend time in prayer and to sit.
Cool. So I think this is good. This may be able to be combined with some of this stuff back here, but I know we have some B-roll of her like reading the Bible and stuff, which could be cool to put over that if we end up using it. So I just added a note, and I like all this beginning stuff here. This is really good. And then you'll notice if you film more videos, people kind of have different ways of talking, and she's a little harder to cut between, basically. So as I'm listening, I'm trying to think of a good point I could maybe like cut and just use this beginning part. And I think there are, but a lot of these bigger sections where she's talking about something more in depth are a little harder to split up. So we'll see what else she says.
I could talk about it like that. So prior to college and that deep transformative work that the Lord did in that first year and so on in college, I really, in high school and even middle school too, struggled with confidence in who I was and appreciating myself and the gifts that God had given me. I also just felt really like stuck in sin and some of the poor habits that I had, and just felt like there was no way out, and I didn't really know. I'm seeking you, God. I'm trying to trust you with these things, and yet I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm not really getting closer to you. I'm still making those sinful choices, and that was really incredible to see what God did because of how he shaped me in that first year. In middle school and high school, I was still feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God, and I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change, and so I was struggling with self-confidence, I was struggling with friendships, I felt stuck in sinful habits that I didn't want to do but kept making poor decisions and felt frustrated and honestly even angry with God, like, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why can't I get out of these sinful habits that I'm doing? And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of hope in that way. And it wasn't until that first year of college when I really started to own my faith and I really started pursuing Jesus that the Lord shared with me a truth that I will probably never forget. And it was just this idea of, it's not that I just don't want to sin. It's not that I just don't want to do these things. Instead, I have to replace that with a desire for godliness, and I have to replace that with seeking the Lord, and that my relationship with him, as I pursue that, I just don't want the sin as much, and I don't want to do the things that are against God's heart, and that really changed.
Cool, so that's good. I think that may be a really good part to leave in because it adds it's kind of something like I can relate to, because hearing somebody's story is really good, but I think a lot of people are kind of listening to that and they're kind of trying to apply that to their own lives in a way. So I think this part where she's talking about that and she kind of goes a little more broad and kind of gives you more of a principle out of her story, which is really cool. And I think a lot of what she's talking about has to do with like her younger life and then leading into her first year of college. So I'll probably end up kind of picking one of these like 3 parts that she mentions that and leaving the other ones out.
One of my favorite verses of probably all time, I think. But in Psalms 37:4, it says,
and then we have some B-roll of this verse in our Bible, so that'd be cool to include if we add this in.
Lord, and he will give you the desires. And it's really easy. It's one of those verses you could just look at, I think. But in Psalms 37:4, it really changed my life and heart.
I think what I'll end up, I think that's a good part to cut. So this is like, what is that? 45, 30. So this is like 1:10, this section right here. And I think this may be a really key part to include. I may include a lot of this and then maybe throw in this part about her verse, but I think this may be a really good, like, it's longer, so it's hard, but I think that would be like a really key part of the video.
Oh, like God's just gonna give you anything you want. He's like a genie. He'll just give you. God really gave me a revelation. Sorry, I'll say that again. In that verse is so special to me. But that in that verse, God just gave me a because through that, God really spoke to me. But that...
So these, you're kind of trying to find the part where she messed up and then find the first one and like cut only to the good one.
That verse is so reminded me that the first part is really important, because the first part is necessary before you get through you whatever. Sorry. The first part is really important because that sets up the next part. See, God's not just going to give you any desire that you have in your heart, but really if you take delight in the Lord, if you enjoy spending time in his presence, if you are excited to grow closer to Jesus, he will change your heart. And that's the transformative work of the gospel, that what Jesus has done, he has victory over the grave. He can change our hearts, change our lives now, not just for eternity, including that, but also now. And so when I understood that, how he's shaping he will give to me, because he's a good father and he gives his children good gifts. And so sin, felt guilty, felt like I was a sinner and there was no hope for God to change that and show me, no, I'm a saint. I've been on today.
Okay, that was good.
I think I've definitely learned a lot in my walk with God. I think there's things I've learned when I was younger, in just formative things like how much I was reading the Bible, even though I didn't fully understand all of it, just a heart to know God and a heart to draw close. I think I've learned a lot even in the past few years since that really defining moment in my first year of college. Life isn't always easy, but God does promise to be with us through it. And so even when I walk through hard things with friendships or relationships, I saw how God was just present with me and drew me closer and taught me things. And even in this last year of teaching, first grade, it's hard, it's not always easy, and that has been something that is really difficult to walk through, even as a Christian. It's easy to think that life's just gonna be better because you have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier. And so I think I've learned to continue to trust God even in the hard moments, and I'm just confident that he is not going to stop working in me. He's not going to stop helping me look more like him as I pursue my walk with him.
That was really good. I think that may be a really key piece. I'm kind of envisioning this in my head, and I like a lot of what she says at the beginning about her early life, and then a big defining moment in college. And then this, I like a lot that it honestly could be an ending, because she kind of connects that defining moment to now. And like, although there's hard times, like I've learned a lot that I can take with me from that moment. So that could be a really cool possible end. And obviously there's a lot more, but I'm kind of adding this up in my head as we go. And that was, the good thing about markers is you can see the duration. So this is about a minute. This is like a minute 15. And there's a few sections in here we could pull and maybe get to that like 4-minute mark, which I think is a good part to aim for, and hopefully still have a little bit of wiggle room in there so it doesn't have to be so jam-packed in there. And so I'm going to listen a little bit to what she says here at the end, but I know I was probably kind of just asking questions to make sure we got enough. So a lot of this I'm less inclined to include right off the bat, but we'll see.
As I mentioned, I think a really key moment for me was that first year in college, and really what God did in my heart to change me. I think another really key moment, though, was a summer or two later, so maybe my sophomore or junior year in college. I was just working through some friendship and relationship things in the summer, and really felt kind of isolated and not really close to people, and I'm a big people person, so that was a little hard for sure. And it was during COVID and lots of things going on, a lot of uncertainty. And if you're anything like me, I have a hard time with control and not having control, and so it was difficult, and I felt like there was a lot of things in my life that were really not in my control, and God did a work in me that summer. I started going out for a run, nothing crazy. I've never been.
Okay, I think this is good, but I don't think it's anything I really want to include in the story we're trying to tell. So I'm probably going to skip past most of this and see what is here at the end.
For forgiveness, love that Jesus had. There's quite a few things There's quite a few things that come to mind, so I'll try to keep it brief. But one, just a reminder that God is always with you, no matter if you're going through something really hard or if...
So I think at the end here, I could probably listen to what I actually said. That may be a better way to go about this. But for this example, I think here I was kind of asking her for more practical, what would you tell people, I think is what I was talking about. So this may be cool to include something like that, possible end to like communicate to people, which is cool. And then I think that's probably about it.
And that's the same encouragement I give myself.
I think I shared a lot.
That is the end. So we did cut it down to about 15 minutes of content, which is cool. So this is obviously like there's no gaps in here. This looks pretty even across the board. So one thing that I have gotten accustomed to doing at this point is duplicating my sequence or timeline. And this is gonna be like kind of like full. So I kind of keep a copy of this that has really like just all her content laid out, because if I cut something, it's pretty hard to go back into the multicam and find where it was, and then you got to redrag the audio and stuff like that. So it's a little difficult. So we kind of have like her whole content story laid out here as like a reference. And I'm kind of going to keep this and probably not touch it, but for those times that you cut something out or you really think this other piece at the end here may go really well, it's easier to have this. I can copy it and paste it in my final sequence than trying to go find it again. So that's just something I've started doing that's kind of helped a lot. But here, so now that kind of frees me up. Now I know I have this sequence that can just be cut up, and I can do whatever I want, and I know at least I have kind of a backup, which helps me at least. So I'm going to go through and cut a lot of this out. I think this one I was going to cut, so I can do a command delete to ripple delete it, and we are just cutting time out like crazy. So I do want to make sure my markers stay though. I'm just going to listen through and just kind of start cutting some stuff out that I know I don't really want to have in, and probably end up choosing one of these clips to include that relates her early childhood to like college defining moment type thing.
But I knew I hadn't accepted my heart, and kind of marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God. Yeah, I always loved to read when I was young.
So this part about reading, it was cool, but she just says in this next one right here,
Even though I was reading the Bible,
she says she's reading the Bible. So all those is cool. I don't think it's essential to know that she liked reading and that's why she was reading the Bible. I think that can be left out, which is fine. So I'm going to delete that.
a lot, even as a young kid, and
then before we go much further, actually, and we probably could have done this on our full sequence as well, but right here, you can see our lav mic here at the bottom is pretty low volume-wise. Like if I solo this and play it.
of Christians who were sold out for God. They weren't really caught up in, every now and then I'll go to church.
We're like solid peaking at -12 or -13, which is pretty low. Because now we've cut out all those other high peaks that are really messing with our level. So what I can do here is normalize our audio level, and these I want to be relative because I want to keep these all pretty much the same to maybe -1.5, but here we can go maybe a little lower, -3, normalize, and that's going to bring it up a ton. And again, like I think I mentioned this in the earlier part about filming, I don't really use both of these a ton. Sometimes I'll like mix them in, and we'll talk about it in audio. But it's always good to have a backup, and sometimes there's noise coming in from the boom mic, although I do like using that one more most of the time because it just has a more natural sound. Like I'm using a boom shotgun mic, the same one, filming this video, so I just like that more, but it's always good to have options and backups.
Request to God is something that I have.
And you can do the same with this mic here before I forget. So it actually brought it down just a little bit, so it's probably at a good level. But you can see towards the end, she got a bit quieter here. So if you want, you could bring these up just so the level's higher, but it looks more consistent with the other ones. But it might be, the only thing to worry about is it might be like a noticeable shift between clips. If there's a lot of background noise, you might be able to hear kind of the noise in the background lift up as well, and that can be hard to cut in. But I'll leave it up just a little bit, maybe not quite that much.
My commitment to follow God. even though I was reading the Bible a lot, even as a young kid, and I had that moment of salvation, I would say that I was kind of like a spiritual high Christian, where like I would just keep going until I'd hit this point where I'm like, oh yes, like I follow God. Whether that was summer camps as a middle schooler or even in high school, like serving a lot at church and being involved, but still just missing a depth of my relationship with the Lord where I was spending personal time with him. That just wasn't really there, honestly, until I got into college. And so my freshman year, I would say, is a big marking point in my life. I was moved away from home, away from the community that I had grown up with, and I really saw a picture of Christians who were sold out for God. They weren't really caught up in, every now and then I'll go to church and feel really good about like following God, and then I'll go back to the things I actually want to do. I just saw people who would wake up early, spend time with the Lord, fast and pray intentionally just to spend time with God. And that sparked something in me. It was kind of like the missing piece, I think, from a basic understanding of like, Jesus is my Savior. He died on the cross for my sins. Now I'll go to heaven with him. Instead, it took it to another level, whereas like, Jesus can change my life today. And like the choice that I have to spend time with him, to be in his word, to worship him, to pray, to bring those requests to God is something that I have to be intentional about each day. Otherwise, I won't look more like him. Otherwise, I'm missing the joy that he promises is for us today if we abide in him. And so I think that first year of college, being separated from some of the stuff that I grew up with and really having to own my walk with God really changed the trajectory of my life.
That's tough. That was really good. I wish I could keep all that in. I might not be able to. That's definitely the hardest part about these kind of things is you're trying to cut out story, which is really hard to do. But that is kind of the goal. So I don't know. That's tough. It's hard doing this on the spot because this is literally I haven't edited this before, so I'm trying to figure out this story as we go. But I'm gonna watch through a little more and see what I think is the best out of this middle section here, because I like starting here early life to like a minute in, and then probably ending on these 1 or 2. So this is 8:44 to 10:55, so that's like 2 minutes. So maybe if I have like a minute in the middle, then I'll have about 4 minutes. Seems reasonable. So maybe if I pick about a minute from all this stuff in the middle, that'd be good. But I think a lot of it was covering the same thing. So I'm gonna kind of listen through and see if I can find one good part that I feel like summarizes a lot of it.
I think I would phrase giving my testimony from like when I first got saved when I was like 5 or 6 all the way up till now is that early decision.
I'm gonna cut off that beginning and just start it like she's saying that early decision.
5 or 6 all the way up till now is that
Oops.
That early decision did set a foundation for me of really wanting to follow God. And so I think without that moment, I wouldn't have had as much of a care to follow God. And so I think it set me on the right path. But I think my frustration, even in like middle school and high school, was I didn't really feel like I knew how to be close to God. I felt like I would try to do the right things or be the good Christian or the girl that always did the right things and kind of miss out on that closeness in my walk with God. And so I think like that defining moment really came in college when I chose for myself, I'm going to wake up early to read the Bible and I'm going to choose to spend time in prayer. And I had people who walked alongside with me. I think that's huge in sharing our stories is that there are so many people who play a role in showing us what it looks like to follow Christ in discipleship. And so for the first time in my life, I had older women around me, even if they were still college students, who showed me what their time with God looked like and how they pursued Jesus and how that affected every part of their life. And so that first year of college, I think, was so transformative because it was finally connecting the foundation I had of like knowing Bible stories, knowing about God, accepting him, but not really knowing how to feel close to him. And so I think in college, it really felt like a bridge that kind of connected those things so that I could really be passionate for the Lord and I could really allow my life to be a visual of how God was changing me from the inside out.
That was good. I like that probably a little more. I think I mentioned earlier that it's a little more applicable and relatable. Now that is 3 to 4:40, so it's like 1:40, which is a lot. But again, we have our full thing here, so I'm gonna go ahead and just be bold and delete some of this stuff. Although it's tough because a lot of it's really good. I think at some point you just have to decide, like, here's how we're gonna craft this story, and some of this just isn't gonna be seen, at least right now. So that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. And I'd love to get this a little shorter. Maybe we'll be able to, but I think we'll probably end up deleting most of this right here. So I'm gonna watch through. I know I said to keep this, so let's see.
So prior to college and that deep transformative work that the Lord did in that first year and so on in college, I really, in high school and even middle school too, struggled with confidence in who I was. And
if you've already watched it and you want to have a lot of fun, you can hit L and you can watch it at 2x speed and kind of get the gist. So, little secret.
Appreciating myself and the gifts that God had given me, I also just felt really like stuck in sin and some of the poor habits that I had and just felt like there's no way out. And I didn't really know. I'm seeking you, God. I'm trying to trust you with these things. And yet I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm not really getting closer to you. I'm still making those sinful choices. And that was really incredible to see what God did because of how he shaped me in that first year. In middle school and high school, I was still feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God. And
I'm going to delete this. I think it's a little separate topic.
I didn't quite.
And sometimes if our markers are a little over the edge, it won't ripple them, so
Hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change. And so I was struggling with self-confidence. I was struggling with friendships. I felt stuck in sinful habits that I didn't want to do, but kept making poor decisions and felt frustrated and honestly even angry with God. Like, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why? I was still feeling like I was having a hard, in middle school and high school, I was still feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God. And I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change. And so I was struggling with self-confidence. I was struggling with friendships. I felt stuck in sinful habits that I didn't want to do, but kept making poor decisions and felt frustrated. And honestly, even angry with God. Like, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why can't I get out of these sinful habits that I'm doing? And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of hope in that way. And it wasn't until that first year of college when I really started to own my faith and I really started pursuing Jesus that the Lord shared with me a truth that I'll probably never forget. And it was just this idea of, it's not that I just don't want to sin. It's not that I just don't want to do these things. Instead, I have to replace that with a desire for godliness. And I have to replace that with seeking the Lord. And that my relationship with him, as I pursue that, I just don't want to sin as much.
I really like this part. I think I misspoke earlier. I think I was talking about this one was one that I really wanted to keep. But I'm missing a little bit of that bridge with going to college. So I'm going to undo and see if this clip was maybe this bridge.
So prior to college and that deep transformative work that the Lord did in that first year and so on in college, I really, in high school and even middle school too, struggled with confidence in who I was and sin and some of the poor habits. I'm not really getting.
No, I think I was right. I think that's fine to go, but I'd really love to use this part. So honestly, I may, even though I like a lot of what she said here, I think I may just cut this and see how this part plays against our first clip here. So let's try that.
Understanding of salvation. I remember praying with my mom and asking Jesus to come into my heart and kind of marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God. In middle school and high school, I was still feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God. And I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change. And so I was struggling with self-confidence. I was struggling with friendships. I felt stuck in sinful habits.
I think that could work. Let's see if this one, we're getting the time close. So let's see if I need this one at all.
That verse is so special to me because through that, God really spoke to me. And just that God will sets up the next part. See, God's not presence. If you are excited what Jesus has done, he has victory.
So again, I thought this was really good, but I do want to keep this more on her story And this was a lot about the verse, so I'll include a little bit about it. And I like that we have footage of that verse, which is cool. But I'd like to keep this verse part a lot shorter.
It's one of those verses you could just look at and say. But in Psalms 36, it really changed my life in that way and led me to one of my favorite verses of probably all time, I think. But in Psalms 37:4, it says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." And it's really easy. It's one of those verses you could just look at and say, oh, like, God's just going to give you anything you want. He's like a genie. He'll just give you whatever your heart desires. But that verse is so special to me because through that, God really spoke to me and reminded me that the first part is what is necessary before you get to the second part. It's not just that God will give you whatever. The first part is really important because that sets up the next part. See, God's not just going to give you any desire that you have in your heart. But really, if you take delight in the Lord, if you enjoy spending time in his presence, if you are excited to grow closer to Jesus, he will change your heart. And that's the transformative work of the gospel, that what Jesus has done, he has victory, and that's the transformative to Jesus. He will change your heart.
Well, this was cool. I think this may be cool to keep. This may tie in the rest of this, but I'm going to cut the rest of this clip like that. And now we are right around 5 minutes, which is pretty good. I'm kind of liking where we're at. But again, this is a lot of content, so if there's some that I can cut out, I'm going to keep doing that to get it down a lot shorter if we can, but a lot of this is really good, so we'll keep working on it.
There's quite a few things that come to mind, so I'll try to keep it brief. But one, just a reminder that God is always with you. No matter if you're going through something really hard or if you're in a really fun season of life, the Lord is present. And so I would just encourage you to draw close to him. He is always there. It's usually just us that have to come close. And so I would just encourage you to slow down, and something I'm working on myself, slow down to listen to the Lord and to hear the things that he has for your life. And then lastly, I would just say, if you feel stuck in sin, if you feel stuck in any kind of struggle that you're facing right now, just know that if you have been made new in Christ, then you are a new creation. You are no longer tied to this identity of a sinner. You are a saint. That means that you can walk in the freedom that Jesus has already bought for you, helping me look more like him as I pursue my walk with him. God is all.
That's hard. I'd love to keep some of this on the end. I think I'd like to have something that's a little more relatable to people than just a story. She's kind of like telling people, which I love. But it's kind of, again, hard to cut, especially in the end. It's hard to cut a middle word and that be the end because it doesn't feel like final. So I may need to use, I don't know if I'll need to use this whole thing.
I think I've definitely learned a lot in my walk with God. I think there's things I've learned when I was younger, in just formative things like how much I was reading the Bible, even though I didn't fully understand all of it, just a heart to know God and a heart to draw close. I think I've learned a lot even in the past few years since that really defining moment in my
I'm going to start here, and maybe I don't use this clip at all, but I'm going to at least see how it is if I start here and kind of cut off that beginning.
I've learned a lot even in the past few years since that really defining moment in my first year of college. Life isn't always easy, but God does promise to be. I've learned a lot even in the past few years since that really defining moment in my first year of college. Life isn't always easy, but God does promise to be with us through it. And so even when I walk through hard things with friendships or relationships, I saw how God was just present with me and drew me closer and taught me things. And even in this last year of teaching, first grade, it's hard, it's not always easy, and that has been something that is really difficult to walk through, even as a Christian. It's easy to think that life's just going to be better because you have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier. And so I think I've learned to continue to trust God even in the hard. God is always with you, no matter if you're going through something really hard. have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier. And so I think I've learned to continue to trust God even in the hard moments, and I'm just confident that He is not going to stop working in me. He's not going to stop helping me look more like Him as I pursue my walk with Him.
This is tough to decide exactly. This is the hardest part for me, is trying to actually craft the story. It'd be much easier if it was all like cut together and we just have to add music and color grade it. So it's tough. But I think at this point, hopefully a lot of this has been helpful in refining the story. And every story is different, so it's hard to speak to any of them, or to speak to all of them. But I think I'm just going to kind of choose a direction. I think I'm going to cut this end part. We'll just end where she's talking here, and then I'm going to move on to start adding in some B-roll and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just try this. I'm going to cut this part out, and then I'll leave the B-roll, but the rest of this we can cut because it's not really relevant anymore. So that's like most of our story. Now I think next I'm actually going to go find some music, and we can play it alongside this video to kind of see what it sounds like. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to music, filter by like genre mood. This is Artlist, which is what I use personally for all my videos, which is really good. Let's see, let's try ambient. Mood is also really good. Probably like something uplifting and hopeful. Like all those are pretty typical. Like you could probably grab any for a testimony. I think that's fine. Let me just listen to a few of these. There's like some worship ones in here, which are cool, but again, not like super important to have a worship song in this video or anything. I like this kind of feel. It's pretty typical, like testimony, I know, but this kind of feels pretty easy. I think it's like light. It's easier to hear her voice. It's not competing a whole lot with it. So what I like to do here is play this at like a pretty low volume and then play my video so I can kind of preview it without downloading it and dragging it in and all that.
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age, so my life before Christ, I can't remember a lot of it, but I do remember the moment of salvation.
I like that feel a lot. I can definitely see it. I think that could work really well. What I'm gonna do is click on this one and find a few similar ones to see if there's anything close that sounds a little bit better. And another thing to consider here is this song that I was playing a second ago. You can see it's fairly consistent. It starts off slower. It's a little shorter, but that's fine. We can kind of blend it together, but it's important to remember songs like this one right here are a little tougher because although this part right here may sound really good, that's not a huge portion of the song. This is probably like 30 seconds. So we want one that's gonna work for a longer portion of our video, like these that are a little more consistent. Those aren't like a whole lot better. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this wave file of this one. So I just dragged in the music, and then we're gonna drag this down onto a new track. And it's a little shorter, but that's fine. We're gonna be able to like blend it out really nice. So I'm gonna call this our boom. And this is our lav. And then this is gonna be music, like that. We'll kind of see how this works towards the beginning. I'll cut in just a little bit. And then I'm gonna space all this out. I know I have a marker, but I'm gonna just give us a little more room in the beginning to kind of feel it out. And then I know what I'm gonna do with the track here is bring this down to like -18, which is easier than the clip, and I can still see the waveforms, versus if I bring this down, it's like harder to tell. the beginning is like.
I remember.
That's not bad. I think we could probably start there. And then I'm gonna start bringing in some B-roll as well. So I'd like to start on B-roll. I think that would be a cool vibe. Maybe one of these a little more like generic shots. I want to save like seeing her maybe for after a couple lines. And we don't have a ton. Ideally we'd have a little more, especially for a 4-minute video. These can get used up pretty quick, but that's okay for today. And I think all these are in 60 frames a second, so we can slow it down, which is cool. This is kind of cool. I like this. Yeah, that's a cool vibe. Let's just grab the video of that and drop it on, oops. Drop it on our second layer up here and then change our speed to 40% and drag it out some more. So what I'd like to do is like hear the music, maybe fade this in. I don't know, we're kind of feeling it out.
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age, so my life before Christ.
That's a good feel. Let's do that. And I know I want to cut off her beginning here, but I don't want to ripple edit the music because again, if we do this and then do this, like we are messing everything up. So let's not do that. Let's turn it off for our B-roll and our music so that I could just use my shortcut, cut right to the beginning, and let's add a little fade just in case there's any weird sounds. And this is actually kind of off, which is fine. We can deal with that later. I probably won't really even use it, but it is kind of off by like almost a frame. Let's add a fade here as well. And then let's grab all these and move them up just a little, maybe by this beat.
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age, so my life before Christ.
This is cool, actually. I kind of like this. It's like you kind of get the feel that she's outside and she's kind of like talking to herself, like she's writing out what she's saying. So that could be cool. Let's try that. That'd be cool. That's not bad. Let's do that. Change it to 40%. And get back our time here.
I can't remember a lot of it, but I do remember the moment of salvation, even though I'm pretty sure I was only like 5. I was really young. But I remember being in the car with my 5. I was really young. But I remember being in the car with my
It's cool. That's cool.
really young. But I remember being in the car with my
This is cool. I can imagine like seeing her after that. I like that.
young. But I remember being in the car with my parents, and I grew up in a Christian home. I knew who Jesus was from church and from talking with them, but I knew I hadn't accepted.
So this, if you had another camera, I definitely start incorporating it because if the more shots, not to a crazy margin, but the more shots you can have at the beginning just to keep people interested, the better. So maybe this is a point we can use our second angle and see how that looks.
Christian home. I knew who Jesus was from church and from talking with them, but I knew I hadn't accepted him as my savior. And I remember being in the car, driving with my parents, I'm not sure where, but I remember thinking, I know I need Jesus.
Go back to angle 1.
Jesus, and I know I'm not perfect, and I know that I need a savior, and I know
That's pretty cool.
what Jesus has done for me, and I want my life to be for him.
That's cool. So maybe here we can have some of her journaling like that. Drag it down. Slow motion as always.
My life to be for him. And I remember going home that night and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord and kind of having a really like childlike understanding.
So I like the slow feel too. I mean, this is looking pretty good. And I'm okay front loading more of the B-roll as people get more invested in her story. I feel like it's easier to just watch her talk. But in this beginning, as we're kind of still getting introduced to her story, like we can show her Bible and show her like reading and stuff like that. Her looking nice, some cinematic B-roll. So this is cool. This would be good to incorporate with this because it's kind of like another angle right here. And then another big thing I wanted to hit on here is hiding your cuts. So obviously this cuts to a different clip. It's not really even close, although she's sitting in relatively the same spot. Same with these. And I really like to strategically place B-roll to where that will be covered up by the B-roll, basically, so that that just sounds like she just keeps talking. So what I'm gonna do is probably slide this a little more there and maybe extend these both just a little. See how that sounds.
That night and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord and kind of having a really like childlike understanding of salvation. I remember praying with my mom and asking Jesus to come into my heart and kind of marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God. In middle school and high school, I was still...
So that's fine, but I definitely want a bigger gap here. Like, let's start that B-roll later and have some where she's just not talking, because it's like you need a little bit to process what she's saying.
Day as like, this is my commitment to follow God.
Yeah, I definitely like having more gaps for sure. So let's do like maybe this close up here.
In middle school and high school, I was still...
So that's cool. Let's do that. Oops. Some slow motion here. Do like that, and then start her other clips there.
I'm marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God.
So she starts writing in the middle, and I like that a little sooner. So I'm gonna hit T to use trim mode and just drag this clip itself within our cut a little sooner. Let's go ahead and start these clips right here.
Feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God, and I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change, and so I was struggling with self-confidence, I was struggling with friendships, I felt stuck in sinful habits that I didn't want to do but kept making poor decisions, and honestly even angry with God, like, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why can't I get out of these sinful habits that I'm doing? And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of hope in that way. And it wasn't until that first year of college when I really started to own my faith and I really started pursuing Jesus that the Lord shared with me a truth that I will probably never forget. And it was just this idea of, it's not that I just don't want.
So let's go ahead and I can save some of the B-roll, we can add some in later, but let's do like a closer up on her. So if you had another camera that's like closer for a little tighter and a little more emotional part, that'd be really good.
Probably never forget. And it was just this idea of, it's not that I just don't want to sin. It's not that I just don't want to do these things. Instead, I have to replace that with a desire for godliness. And I have to replace that with seeking the Lord. And that my relationship with Him, as I pursue that, I just don't want the sin as much. And I don't want to do the things that are against God's heart. And that it really changed my life in that way.
Cool, that's cool. So let's add a little gap here. I'm gonna cut this little part out. that. Add some fade, just real slight fades.
It really changed my life in that way and led me to one of my favorite.
Cool, let's do some reading the Bible stuff. That's good, let's do that. Let's just grab this one, do her reading the Bible. So we're kind of trying to lead into the B-roll of the verse she's talking about.
To do the things that are against God's heart. Against God's heart. And as I pursue that, I just don't want the sin as much. And I don't want to do the things that are against God's heart.
What was the verse that she said again?
It really changed my life in that way. And verses of probably, but in Psalms 37:4, it's
all right, so let's do that. Throw this one in, and she's kind of doing a big intro for it. So this footage might have to last a little longer, which is fine. This B-roll, because she doesn't mention it till like here.
4, it says, take delight in the Lord.
So let's leave that for there, and then find another shot maybe to fill this gap, and then go back to her, and then go to the verse there. Let's do actually like this. Save this for here, and find some more B-roll. Or what we could also do is just switch angles. That may be easier here.
Or against God's heart. It really changed my life.
Let's do that. We can save this B-roll, and we'll just cut angles right here.
Want to do the things that are against God's heart. It really changed my life in that way. And
yeah, I like that a lot. That's a good feel. So then what I'm going to try and do is maybe like a J or an L cut, which is basically just moving the video here, which would be a J cut because you have your footage here, kind of like a J, this next clip, versus an L cut is like your first clip makes like an L, like that. And that kind of just helps transition a little better. It makes it feel like there's not like this cut next clip. It makes it just like just an easier transition. It kind of feels like you're cutting in the middle of a word, even though you're not. So let's see if that's even possible here.
the things that are against God's heart. It really changed my
Not that much. Let's try the other side.
the things that are against God's heart. It really changed my
Maybe just a little bit.
or against God's heart. It really changed my life in
So sometimes it's easier than others, but I think that I'll leave. I think that's fine.
that way and led me to one of my favorite verses of probably all time, I think. Verses of probably all time, I think. But in Psalms 37:4, it says, take delight in the 4, it says 37:4, it says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the where it says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And it's really easy, desires of your heart. And it's really easy. It's one of those, and it's really easy. It's one of those verses you could just look at and say, oh, like, God's just gonna give you anything you want.
So this is coming good. I think this is going really well. Now the music is kind of fading off, so what I'm going to do is kind of duplicate it and blend it in, and it's easier than it sounds, believe it or not. Really, I'm just going to kind of try and start it back up here, and it's pretty easy to end in these kind of instrumental ambient feels. You can end pretty much whenever. So I'm really just trying to find here a good similar section. See how the beat is right here if I solo this. Okay, so there's like kind of 4 beats there.
Led me to one of my favorite.
Hey, gotta lower that one. So with these, like, I don't inherently like know a whole lot about how to make these line up, but we can kind of cheat it a little bit. Like, let's say we're here and we just blend these together, and let's just see how it sounds if it's all that noticeable. If I just probably solo these two. I think that's perfect. I think we nailed it. So what I am gonna do is drag these together and add a fade so they're on the same track. That just makes stuff a little easier. But this is easier to line it up when they're above and below each other. So I'm gonna do that. And here what we'll do is just set some markers for the beginning and end, and then I want the middle to be like here and just add a really big fade. Kind of like there and there. Boom. Let's give that a listen. That is awesome. That sounds really good. So obviously we have more than we need, so I'm going to cut a lot of this out, but we'll leave it for now. And we can delete this track on solo.
And say, oh, like, God's just gonna give you anything you want. He's like a genie. He'll just give you whatever your heart desires. But see, God's not just gonna give you any desire that you have in your heart. But really, if you take delight in the Lord, if you enjoy spending time in His presence,
I'm gonna switch cameras here.
if you are excited to grow closer to Jesus, He will change your heart. I've learned a lot even in the past few.
All right, so this is definitely a more abrupt switch in her voice and stuff. So I'm gonna use some more B-roll to cover and add a little more gap so it doesn't feel so tight. I like that, that's cool. Let's just see.
To grow closer to Jesus, He will change your heart. Grow closer to Jesus. He will change your heart. I've learned.
Let's switch this camera earlier, and then I have our B-rolls. We kind of got like clip, clip, clip. Let's add another one here. I think for sure. And we still have a pretty good amount of footage available, so I think that's fine. So as I kind of use up B-roll, like I know there's other spots I could add it that it might be cool. And honestly, you could be fine just adding these pockets of 2 to 3 clips. You can see that's what we did here, and it feels really good. So that's an option.
It's a few years since that really defining moment. In my first year of college. Defining moment.
I'm gonna go ahead and cut out this just because.
Really defining moment.
And then I like to leave a little gap because if you cut it right here,
in my first year of college.
it's fine, but it could be a little more noticeable.
Defining moment in my first year of college. Life isn't always easy, but God does promise to be with us through it. And so even when I walk through hard things with friendships or relationships, I saw how God was just present with me. And
This may be cool to start some more B-roll. It's not the most variety, I know, but it's still pretty cool. Yeah, let's try these.
was just present with me and drew me closer and taught me things. And even in this last year of teaching, first grade, it's hard, it's not always easy, and that has been something that is always easy and not always easy, and that has
Just a little gap to cut up our time a little bit. That's cool, let's use that. here. We're getting somewhere.
Great, it's hard, it's not always easy, and that has been something that...
Let's give it a little more time before we turn the page.
Easy, and that has been something... It's not always easy, and that has been something that is really difficult to walk through, even as a Christian. It's easy to think that, like, and as a Christian. It's easy to think that life's just gonna be better because you have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier. And so I think I've learned to continue to trust God even in the hard moments, and I'm just confident that He is not gonna stop working in me. He's not gonna stop helping me look more like Him as I pursue my walk with Him.
It's cool. Let's add some fade out, and I don't know the best way to end this. These are kind of hard. I know I want to fade the audio. Sometimes I like bringing it a little further out here.
Pursue my walk with Him.
Maybe fade her out some.
Pursue my walk with Him.
And we could add more B-roll, possibly. Is this sim? Did I even cut this? Nope.
And so I think I've learned to pursue my walk with Him.
Let's make this a little longer and then shorten this one.
My walk with Him.
This is good. Okay, that's good. That feels pretty decent on the end. This is a pretty good cut. We still have some B-roll we haven't used here, but a lot of it is very similar. So that's fine. I think we can almost leave it at that. Let's move on, just for time's sake here. Let's move on and do some of the color grading stuff real quick. So what I'm gonna do is go back into our multicam sequence, which is kind of how I like to color grade multicam clips. Go to the color page. We're gonna group these to a roll. So we can color grade them both at the same time since it's literally the same clip. And then disable this so I can see. I want to grade off of this one, not the closer up one for sure. We're going to go to group post clip and then come over to my power grades. I'm going to just grab my node tree here, which is like my default. And this, I give you this if it comes with the course, but you can just use this. I have this set up for HDR wheels and it's configured to my color space, hopefully, and gamma. So S-Log3, and then so are the HDR wheels over here. And then color space here, we're just going S-Gamut 3.Cine, S-Log3 to DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. So I'm doing the majority of my grading in that wider color space of DaVinci Intermediate. And then the color space here, I'm going Wide Gamut Intermediate to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So there you go, and then I'm doing LUTs after that. So just gonna walk through my process a little bit. The HDR wheels, if I need to do any exposure adjustments, I'm doing it here in the global, just because this exposure works just really well. So watching my waveform, I'll make sure it's reset, and then our exposure was pretty solid, I think. I'm gonna bring it up just slightly, but it looks good. Let's check out our shadows here. Looks fine to me, and then the lights. Yeah, that's fine. So I didn't really change a whole lot, but that's where I would do it, is the HDR. I just get really good performance out of those HDR wheels. And here too, you can adjust your temperature here. I'll use my vector scope as a reference for that and turn on like 2x. It looks pretty close, but there's a little bit of shift we can correct for, which I think it's not our temperature. It's gonna be tint a little to the green side. So let's just Command D, disable, enable. It looks like it helps just a little bit, but it's super minor. Just a little white balance fix. So I can delete this one. I usually do white balance here, but sometimes, I had that node there just because. And the exposure here, like again, since I've done it in HDR wheels, I've done white balance and exposure less in DaVinci Wide Gamut in just my offset wheels here. But that's another option. If you don't want to deal with the HDR, I would do it in our wider gamut in exposure, and then you can just use your offset, but that's an option, and you can use the shadows and highlights and stuff. So that's fine, but we'll do it all in HDR, and then we'll just leave it contrast saturation here in the middle. So let's boost up our contrast as always, pretty much. And I'm gonna switch back to my waveform. Just our pivot, make sure we're getting like some good contrast. We can do like before and after. Looking pretty good. Look at that. Yeah, looks pretty good, that's helping. And then we'll up our saturation, not a ton, just a little. Yeah, I think we can go a little more than that. Yeah, like there. So then what I can do is hold command, select contrast and HDR. And so basically, if I disable these, I'm just going from this to Rec 709. So I can kind of see what I'm changing and helping here. So let's do that. It's already a huge difference. Like you can tell without this is if I just applied my node tree right off the bat a minute ago. That's how we're looking, which is fine. It's better than the log, obviously, but still pretty bland, not really looking too good. But even just some slight exposure, contrast, saturation adjustments, we're looking like a way better. It pops a lot more. And then there's a lot more I could go into, obviously, but what I've been doing lately is I've been using just some really, I would say pretty subtle, like finishing LUTs. Over here, I've been using the ones from Landon, by the way, in his official LUTs. He gave these out for free a while ago, and these things have been really good. Like you can get in a good spot here, but sometimes the colors are just like, they're not really looking that cool. Like it looks fine, but some of these LUTs have been really cool. They give you just a really nice little boost of color. So say if I apply this to the current node, like you can see if I full screen, this is with the LUT, this is without. So it's really subtle, but it really brings out the warmth on her shoulder and really brings out some of the blues, and her face a little bit, looks a little better. So it's really subtle, and you can go into this node key, bring down the gain. This is basically like 0 here, or 1 is 100%. So you can control it. And I like that one a lot, but let's try some of these other ones. That one's cool. That's a little too much, but see, you could apply this and take it down a lot, and that's actually kind of a cool look. I don't mind that. There's this one, and then this is more of a film one, so that's an option. But for people in the frame, I don't usually like using these really film looking LUTs with people in them, because they take a little more tweaking and they can come off as a little more intense. But if you bring down the intensity, that's not bad either. I don't actually mind that. So here, let's add another node. Let's try to do this one. Disable that and enable that. It's all just kind of tweaking and seeing what you like and what you think looks good. So with only this one and then enabling this one, and honestly, both of them look pretty good. I don't typically like stack LUTs. That's not necessarily my typical practice, but I kind of like the look here. Let's see if we can just adjust it. So as you can see, like this is typical for most of my videos. Like this is nothing really complicated. This is just how I do most of my videos. Like LUTs are pretty useful if you know how to use them, seriously. And using those have been kind of a game changer, because I can get it in a good spot here, obviously, and this is like good. But then this, it just like pops out of the screen so much more. So those have been really cool to be able to use, and I'd suggest grabbing those. I'm sure they're still free on his site. All his LUTs, these 5, have been really good. But also there's a lot of other LUTs out there that people use that are good just for getting that final good look on your image. And I'm pretty happy with this. So even stacking them, it's like, hey, if it looks good, it looks good. You know what I mean? So let's stick with that. So now that we've graded all that A-roll, I'm gonna enable this one again. That still looks pretty good. And then let's go back to our main sequence, the testimony. And then what I wanna do is basically group all this B-roll and grade all that to have a similar look, but then we can go on the clip level and control the exposure and stuff if we need to. But all this, that looks pretty cool, honestly, like that. So you can do it in this clip view. You can also go to the light box, and I'm just gonna select all these. I guess, honestly, another way to do it would be to hold Option, click on video 1, so it disables our A-roll, which we've already graded, and then we can just click, Shift click, select all these, new group, B-roll, and then let's do it like that. And honestly, let's do this. I'm gonna go back to my A-roll multicam, go to the color tab. Let's go to color and then make sure I'm selected over here. I'm gonna save this in memory and then go back to our sequence, go to the color tab, make sure I'm post clip, and then I'm gonna load that memory in. So it's gonna give us the same grade we used for our A-roll. And I just like to do that. Sometimes I like to start from there because I want the B-roll to have a similar look. I don't want it to be super different, although it is a different location. Let's see. That's cool. That looks pretty good. We're not looking too bad. It's a little saturated and contrasty. We may bring these down some. These LUTs. Maybe a little less contrast. It's kind of a lot. Same with this. So bring it down a little bit because there's already a lot more natural color here than there was like inside. But some of these other ones may need more. So maybe we should be adjusting the contrast at the clip level. Because like this, I would add a little more contrast in there and then add a new Option S, new node. Add some more saturation in this clip. And since we're on the clip level, this is only going to change this one. So if I select these, Command D, looks much better. So, you know, that's just an option. But these look pretty good. Like these are fine. This one definitely needs more contrast because we were kind of shooting with the light, which is tough. So let's do contrast, saturation. Then you can do Shift S to add a new node before. So I want to add this exposure. And then let's go over here to HDR and we'll copy this one, paste it here, but I want to just reset the adjustments that I made. Let's take the exposure down a little. Shadows, fine. Lightness is fine. We can go up a little more. Contrast. Yeah, and then let's just start pivot. Cool, I think that's already definitely much better. This one's cool. This one could use a little more something to it, so let's use our contrast for that, saturation. And obviously what I could do is up it in our group and then just maybe disable it on clips like this that need a little less. So you can do it either way, vice versa, but we're kind of already down that rabbit hole, so this might even be the same clip, but it's okay. Let's copy this clip grade and paste it here. And that looks great. I'll paste it on a few of these others. I mean, there's just literally so many different ways to color. Like, I'm not gonna tell you the right way to do it. This is like pretty much literally how I do most of it though. Just kind of adjusting and adding some contrast where I need it, because these shots can really differ. Like this one looks really different inherently than some of these other ones like this, because we're shooting like a little more backlit. That's a cool shot. That one might need a little more. So I'm just kind of pasting my adjustments that I made on. I'll go back to the edit page now. Cool.
That night, and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord. And
let's do here, let's add a quick title. I think I'm into that. Let's do like Mandi's story. Font, who knows, honestly. I like using New Haas. We can go like all, nope, let's not do that. That's pretty wild. Let's do like Helvetica, New. Maybe we want like an all caps, smaller. You could like, I don't know, I'm not really a designer. I do the video, but this is not too bad. So let's like fade that in. I think that's cool. I'd be down for that.
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age, so my life before Christ, I can't remember a lot of it, but I do remember.
That's cool. I like that. So we could make this title look a little better, but I think it's pretty good. We're in a pretty good spot, I think. We've got pretty much all the cuts hidden and all that. Except for this one. What do we do here?
Desires. But see, God's not just gonna give you any desire that you have in your heart. But really, if you take delight in the
So we kind of missed this part, which is fine. And obviously, like, if I was really doing this, I'd spend a lot more time now. Like, I want to make sure, and I'd watch this whole thing through, but I'll add this full video in at the end so you can see it. So I'm not going to let you sit through that. I would basically just do a lot of the stuff we've already done and just keep kind of refining it. So I'm not going to go through all that, but let's find a way to fix this right here. So it's kind of close to go through more B-roll. Let's try and just switch this angle to 2 and see how that looks.
will just give you whatever your heart desires. But see, God's not just gonna give you any desire.
Let's see, let's enable the track selector here.
Give you whatever your heart desires. See, God's not just gonna give
Pretty good, look at that, come on.
you any desire that you have in your heart. But really, if you take delight in the Lord, if you enjoy spending time in His presence,
That's cool, adjust this a little bit.
take delight in the Lord. If you enjoy spending time in His presence, like
And we adjust it a little bit, but these ends won't adjust, so just bring it back just slightly. The rest of this looks pretty good. There's a good gap here, but that's in the middle, so I'm fine with that. Let's move on to audio. So we'll switch to the Fairlight page, or you can hit Shift-7, which is what I do a lot. And I think I'm gonna stick with just using the boom. I think that's fine. It sounds really good. So what I'm gonna do, I always switch this order to do EQ and then dynamics and then effects, because I like EQing what I don't want out first, because I don't want to like really compress and limit and everything, like all these bad frequencies. I just want to take those out at the beginning, which means we are EQing first. So we'll double click, and then I have a vocal starter preset I've already made, which kind of sets me up for exactly what I'm going to do, which we talked about in the audio editing section. But really what I'm going to do here is just go through this really quick. We covered this a lot more in audio editing, so if you want to know the nitty-gritty of this stuff, like, I would go check out that video. But this one, I'm just gonna make it sound a little better and equalize and try and take out some of these bad frequencies. I'm gonna mute the music for this.
I knew I hadn't accepted Him as my Savior, and I remember being in the car driving with my parents. I'm not sure where, but I remember thinking, I know I need Jesus, and I know I'm not perfect, and I know that I need a Savior, and I know what Jesus has done for me, and I want my life to be for Him. And I remember going home that night and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord, and kind of having a really like childlike understanding of salvation. But I remember praying with my mom and asking Jesus to come into my heart, and kind of marking that day as like, this is my commitment to follow God. In middle school, feeling that closeness to God, and I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change.
It's pretty good. So again, we talked about that a lot in audio editing, but it's just a little bit better. So that's where I EQ, and then compressor. I always compress vocals. I use their preset and then just up my makeup gain, and you could probably get like 25, bring this up by 3 or so. That's pretty safe. And the ratio, anywhere like 2 to 2.5 to 1 is fine.
And so I was struggling with self-confidence. I was struggling with friendships.
Just gonna bring up those lower levels and crush the higher ones a little bit, so you get a little more consistent level but we don't want to do too much, or you take away a lot of that dynamic range that just sounds better.
I felt stuck and sinful because you have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier.
That's good. That's pretty solid. Something I'll do some is add a limiter to this track, and it helps to see it a little bit, to see what we're hitting. But I definitely would like to limit it to negative 1.5 so we know any peaks aren't going to hit that at all. And you can always raise it up a little bit. I know this is kind of what we do with a compressor, but sometimes I like to just bring it up just a little bit more so we get a little more volume, maybe not quite that much.
Hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change, and so I was struggling with self-confidence, I was struggling with friendships, I felt stuck in sin.
So you can see we still have a lot of ways we could go, and we're not even really hitting our limiter, which is negative 1.5. So let's come up just a little bit more, but that's not really a bad thing. We just want to make sure our music and vocals aren't gonna be too hot.
It wasn't until that first year of college when I really started to own my faith and I really started pursuing Jesus that the Lord.
That's good. This music is good because it's different frequencies than our vocals, so they're not really competing. But what I'm gonna do is, I have this preset to cut music for the VO, and you don't wanna do this too much for sure, but if you have music that more sits in the similar range as their vocal, what you can do is just do a real slight dip out here at the 1.2K range. That will kind of help give a little room for your voice to sit in your mix. So that helps some. This music, you won't hear a huge difference, but I'll play it.
I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change, and so I was struggling with
even just bringing it down just a couple dB. You can actually hear a difference, and the voice just sticks out a little bit more. So that's something I'll do. So I think we're pretty much ready to call this done. I think this looks really good. We've got a nice little intro with our title here, which is cool. But we have music, we've got some EQ'd voice, sounds really good. We've got cool visuals, and it's kind of under 4 minutes, which is sick. 3 minutes, anywhere in the 3-minute range, all the way up to 4, I think is a great length for a testimony. And you could spend so much more time really refining the story, but I think just the way that this is laid out is pretty good right now, at least just for this video today. So we're gonna go ahead and export. So we're going to the deliver page, and what we really want to be doing here is, depends on your output. Really what I would do is click on H.264 master, and a lot of times this defaults to QuickTime. I'll change this to an MP4 a lot because that's just a little more compatible. Sometimes I've had issues with the QuickTime version, but I'm sure it's fine to use either. And really all we're doing is just 3840 by 2160. This is the 4K version. I'm gonna go ahead and select 1080p just because we went ahead and cropped in on our multicam. So my intent was to use this more on 1080p projectors on a Sunday service. So obviously, ideally, if we're using 2 cameras and we're both shooting 4K, we don't need to crop in, then the whole thing is 4K. That's what I'm gonna export. And I'm definitely doing Ultra HD, MP4. You can do multi-passing code, which just gives you slightly better quality, but not necessary. This would be like a solid main export. This is what I would upload to YouTube if you need a 4K version. If you need a 1080p version, I would do the same thing. Might as well multi-passing code, and that's pretty much it. And then you're just choosing your location and your file name, and then I think that is all. That's gonna wrap up our testimony video, literally all the way to the final export, which is awesome. So we literally showed from walking on the scene at the very first day to the final export, which is great. So I hope this was super helpful to you, and I hope this whole lesson just helped you to make better church videos.
I remember accepting Jesus at a young age, so my life before Christ, I can't remember a lot of it, but I do remember the moment of salvation, even though I'm pretty sure I was only like 5. I was really young. But I remember being in the car with my parents, and I grew up in a Christian home. I knew who Jesus was from church and from talking with them, but I knew I hadn't accepted him as my savior. And I remember being in the car, driving with my parents, I'm not sure where, but I remember thinking, I know I need Jesus, and I know I'm not perfect, and I know that I need a savior, and I know what Jesus has done for me, and I want my life to be for him. And I remember going home that night and knowing that I wanted to be in heaven with the Lord and kind of having a really childlike understanding of salvation. But I remember praying with my mom and asking Jesus to come into my heart and kind of marking that day as this is my commitment to follow God. In middle school and high school, I was still feeling like I was having a hard time feeling that closeness to God, and I hadn't quite hit college yet where I felt that deep transformative change. And so I was struggling with self-confidence, I was struggling with friendships. I felt stuck in sinful habits that I didn't want to do but kept making poor decisions, and felt frustrated and honestly even angry with God. Why are you allowing this to happen to me? Why can't I get out of these sinful habits that I'm doing? And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of hope in that way. And it wasn't until that first year of college when I really started to own my faith and I really started pursuing Jesus that the Lord shared with me a truth that I will probably never forget. And it was just this idea of, it's not that I just don't want to sin. It's not that I just don't want to do these things. Instead, I have to replace that with a desire for godliness. And I have to replace that with seeking the Lord. And that my relationship with him, as I pursue that, I just don't want the sin as much. And I don't want to do the things that are against God's heart. It really changed my life in that way and led me to one of my favorite verses of probably all time, I think. But in Psalms 37:4, it says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." And it's really easy. It's one of those verses you could just look at and say, oh, God's just gonna give you anything you want. He's like a genie. He'll just give you whatever your heart desires. See, God's not just gonna give you any desire that you have in your heart. But really, if you take delight in the Lord, if you enjoy spending time in his presence, if you are excited to grow closer to Jesus, he will change your heart. I've learned a lot even in the past few years since that really defining moment in my first year of college. Life isn't always easy, but God does promise to be with us through it. And so even when I walk through hard things with friendships or relationships, I saw how God was just present with me and drew me closer and taught me things. And even in this last year of teaching, first grade, it's hard, it's not always easy, and that has been something that is really difficult to walk through, even as a Christian. It's easy to think that life's just gonna be better because you have God, and it is better, but it's just not always easier. And so I think I've learned to continue to trust God even in the hard moments, and I'm just confident that he is not gonna stop working in me. He's not gonna stop helping me look more like him as I pursue my walk with him.
If you made it to the end of this video, first of all, I applaud you. And second of all, if you're interested in learning more about church videography, you should check out the link down in the description. But otherwise, thanks for watching.